Okay, good evening, everybody. It's going after 7, so I'd like to welcome you all here to the November meeting of Environmental Services Committee. So, first item on the agenda is apologies, and first of all, I'm going to go to Councillor Tommy Maguire from Sinn Féin.
Margaret, Chair. Three apologies from Sinn Féin Group in the night. Councillor Christopher McCaffrey, Councillor Anne-Marie Fitzgerald, and Councillor Seamus Green. Margaret, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tommy. Next, I'm going to go to Councillor Victor Warrington from the Ulster Unionist Party. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Baird and Councillor Crawford.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Mary Gardy from the SDLP.
Thank you, Chair. No apologies tonight from ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Paul online?
Yes, I'm online, John.
Yeah, if you go ahead, Councillor Paul Robinson, DUP.
Mark McCann, Councillor Mark McCannon.
Thank you, Paul. And finally, anybody from the single parties or independents? Councillor Emmett McAleer.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the only one I'm aware of is Councillor Keenan, who will be here, but he may be just 10 or 15 minutes late. He's coming straight from work, okay?
Okay, thank you, Emmett. I'm coming back again, Councillor Tommy Maguire.
I just received a message from Councillor Seamus Green. His power's back on. He's online, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. Okay, next we sign the minutes and confidential minutes of the previous meeting held on the 5th of October, and I've already done that. So item 3 is declarations of interest. First, I'm seeing Councillor Earl Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. And declaration of interest is at the stage is item 7.1, Tullyvar Joint Committee.
Thank you, Earl.
Thank you.
And Councillor Bert Wilson.
Yes, Chair. Item 12, just I had an interest in, I had been talking to some of the officers to do with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bert. Councillor Alan Rainey.
7.1 Tullyvar.
Thank you, Alan. And we'll go on to the WebEx and Councillor Keith Elliott.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Agenda item 12, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. I'm not seeing anybody else indicating. If you become aware of something, obviously you'll let us know anyway. Thank you. So next we go to matters arising, and that's from the meeting held on the Wednesday, the 5th of October. And we're going page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. Back, Councillor Emmett McAleer.
Thank you, Chair. Now it's, I suppose, the decision on 6.1, which stretches over page 4 and 5, the previous proposal, and I'm thankful that it was adopted just at last month's meeting. I think it's important just that the action taken by Council is particularly poignant and particularly relevant given the proximity of the proposed works to a primary school locally, and obviously also to a public car park and a road and pedestrian route. Obviously the safety, health and well-being of our residents has to be at the utmost concern to every member in the chamber, and bearing in mind the tragic events of less than a month ago on the 7th of October in Creeslough, we can't be too careful when it comes to being so minded. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank the councillors who supported that proposal last month. And I think really going forward, we would need to be very mindful just in terms of locating this proposed works as we get feedback on it, because I would just be very mindful of this as a potential site for what's planned here, just given what's happened. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Page 5, page 6, page 7, page Page 7, councillor Paul Robinson, see your hand up there?
Matters arising here, Council Chair.
Yeah,
7-1, I asked a question about the dogs last month, and I never got an answer yet. From John Boyle, from the director. How many dogs can a person handle at one time?
sorry,
Yeah, Chair, apologies. I'll come back tomorrow to Councillor Robinson. I'll just check it out. Apologies, forgot all about it.
thank you, John. You happy enough, Paul?
Yes.
Thank you. So page 7, page 8. Councillor Emmett McAleer.
Chair, it's just in 7.2, and it mightn't be the point to raise it now because I know it's mentioned later on in the agenda. It's in relation to the contract with Wise, so I'm just sort of querying at what point we're speaking on that.
It's on the agenda as part of, it's an agenda item, so will be dealt with
Happy
there.
enough to it. That's fair enough, Chair. Thank you.
Page 9. Page 10. And there's one update there to do with electrical. Do you want to come in there, Director John News? This item corresponds 4.1.
Yes, thank you, Chair. At the last meeting, members had asked that Council would write to the utility regulator raising concerns about per electricity structure in Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area and the difficulties that would present in transition. So the response from the utility regulator is attached in the pack at 4.2, as you said. It's to note, really. The utility regulator has set out a number of steps that his offices have been taken in respect of maximum resale price as it applies to ultra low emission vehicles, and also work around the amendment to the direction to introduce an exemption for the recharge of the sale of electricity values. There's also work that they have been doing with NIE Networks regarding proposals for the development of an appropriate EV managed charging trial project, and they look forward to getting the results of that trial in due course. They've also set out some of the stakeholder engagement work that they see as critical to the success of the uptake of electric vehicles, and that's included some direct engagement with the Electric Vehicle Association Northern Ireland Director, and then also engagement with the Department for Infrastructure's EV Infrastructure Task Force. And then they're also working with the departments on the development of an EV Infrastructure Action Plan. So say the paper is out of correspondences there to note.
Thank you, John. Councillor Matthew Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy enough to propose we note this correspondence. Letters, to me, the letter's a mixed bag. There's some really positive inclinations there that they are going to be taking electrical vehicle infrastructure seriously. However, they didn't really answer the question to our letter, which was specifically to do with the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area. I would have liked a wee bit more information of what the actual plans are locally here, because I think outside of Omagh and Enniskillen, there is very little electrical car infrastructure within our district. But yeah, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Are you going to note the correspondence? Thank you. And I'm going to go now to WebEx and bring in Councillor Thomas O'Reilly.
Thanks, Chair. It's certainly a bit like Matthew there, a mixed bag here really in this. While everything is aspirational really, it would be good to see a little bit more detail, because I would even go so far as to say that both within our council area and outside, there is a lot of the charge infrastructure that while there doesn't work. And I think it's important that we actually try to pin down these different bodies to actually look at our council area as a rural area that could benefit, particularly in this cost of living crisis, with proper infrastructure. So work in progress, Chair. Happy to second the noting.
Sorry, Thomas. Are you going to second the noting of the correspondence?
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I'm going to
Chair.
bring in Officer John News here.
Thank you, Chair. And so just noting members' comments about, I suppose, the shortcomings maybe in the response from the utility regulator. Also just note that the correspondence was also sent to, or it was copied to the Departments for Infrastructure and Department for the Economy. And I know obviously utility regulators correspondence references work that DFI are doing to develop an action plan and an EV task force. So some of that detailed information about specific impacts within the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area may be coming from a response from the departments, but we haven't received a response from either of those at this point in time.
Thank you, John. I'm going to go next to Councillor Emmett McAleer.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I suppose there's two sections that kind of jumped out at me in terms of the response. And the first is the whole idea of a maximum resale price and reselling electricity or reselling gas after it's already been purchased. It's to me, it sounds like a bit of a questionable practice in the first place. The second one is the line in the second page, the second last paragraph. This investment will not only come from those making a direct investment in greener technology, but from all energy consumers. So these same companies, and NIE obviously is an offshoot of ESB, who in the early part of this year, first part of this year, made €520 million, or sorry, 520 million euros, an increase in the same period last year of 17%, aren't going to be the ones footing the bill. Again, it's going to be an additional expense on the people that are using electricity. I think there are questions that need to be asked really about that, because again, when you look at the role of the utility regulator, questions again have to be raised about, what is the role? Is it there to protect the consumer, or is it there to facilitate these massive companies that are making profits hand over fist at the expense of our residents? So again, it raises more questions really about the actual role, what this person is doing, what their responsibilities are to the people, as opposed to protecting these companies that are profiting at our expense. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emmett. Next we go to Councillor Seamus Green on WebEx.
Thank you, Chair. I would have serious reservations around all of this direction of electric car use. I would also have serious reservations of the council going too much in support of it, and I'll give you a few reasons. There's a lot of councillors in this council who are completely against mining, which I would agree with them. But the mining that's been done to create these batteries for these electric cars, I believe, is the most dirty and toxic mining that can be done in the world. Imagine if everyone in the world that drives a car, these batteries had to be produced for them. The hazards that would be created on that. We also then have talk about in the south, in the Irish Republic and over in Britain. I heard them warning people that there would be possibly power cuts this winter due to the lack of energy and energy supply. Imagine if every car was being plugged in as well. Where is this electricity going to come from? And I think all of this is going the same direction as the failed gas to the west, when there was a big push to bring gas to the west, and now gas is almost the dearest way of heating a home. So I would have serious reservations on the whole thing. I'll give you one example. Imagine a motorway in England or in anywhere, and in blizzard conditions, and people are trapped in it for a day or a night, and all the batteries run flat. How are they ever going to get them all moved? How is the people going to heat themselves while they're in the car? It's just there's far more answers or questions than answers on this here. So I would be very skeptical about the whole thing. So just a few comments.
Thank you, Seamus. That's some well-made points. Thank you. We'll leave that open for another discussion another day. Okay, not seeing anybody else indicating. Oh, sorry, Robert Irvine. Councillor Robert Irvine.
I don't often agree with Councillor Green, Seamus, but some of the points that he raises actually around electric cars are quite valid. There will be a serious residual problem come about 10 or 12 years down the line, because once the batteries run out of their extended life, which is roughly about 10 to 12 years, they have to be dumped. And currently, I don't think there is a policy worldwide for recycling them. So I think whilst it's a short-term measure with regard to electric cars, I think we're probably giving ourselves another problem further down the line. So some of the points he raises are valid. Some of them I wouldn't necessarily agree with. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, not seeing anybody else indicating, so we're going to move on. So we were at page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14.
Excuse me, John Cahirlock, just on page 12.
Sorry, Bernice. Yeah, go ahead.
No problem. Just very, very quickly on the JCB pothole pro machine, and you will remember from last month we had asked to write back to DFI on their comparables, how they came to the conclusion. You remember the identical letters from last month, but just to say that the incorrect reporting in our local media stated I had said to take this off the agenda. I firmly said that it must remain on our agenda, but at this point I'm very aware of our budget constraints, but so sometime in the future I will be re-raising the issue. And I do note we haven't had a response from DFI on our question thus far, but it will still be on my agenda, as I'm sure other councillors who will undoubtedly still be receiving issues about potholes. Thank you, Guramagat.
Thank you. I'm going to go now to Councillor Earl Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's actually page 13, and it's...
if you can just hold on a second, Earl, I'm going to bring in, I thought you were on the same topic, I'm going to bring in Officer John News.
Chair, thank you. Just in respect of Councillor Swift's comments about the pothole machine, we have written to DFI, and just late this afternoon a response has come in, but it came in so late that it isn't up on decision time, and we will bring that response to next month's meeting. So I suppose I just wanted to correct it in terms of that we haven't received a response. DFI may say they sent a response in today, but it was too late to get it onto our agenda for tonight.
Okay, thank you, John.
Well, just on that, if you could you give me an idea, John, was there anything new or different, or something uplifting and inspiring, encouraging even? Guramagat.
I'm going to say, I haven't had a chance even to see, I've literally been told that a response has come in. I haven't seen the detail of the response myself. But I wouldn't hold out an awful lot of hope that it was terribly enlightening from what members would have hoped. But I'm saying that on the basis of simply a report I've had. I would like to review the letter myself and say we will bring the correspondence to next month's Environmental Services.
Okay. So we then got to page 13, and Councillor Earl Thompson that wanted to come in there.
Yep, thank you very much, Chair. And this item 10.1 says
Earl, I'll stop you there, Earl, and it's not that I'm cutting you off, but it actually is. It's included in the officer's report
later on. That's
later on,
fine.
so if you don't mind,
That's
I
fine.
have that noted that it will be.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Earl. So page 13, 14, 15. Okay, thank you. So next we go to item 5.1, estate matters, and we go to Officer John News.
Thank you, Chair. This is the regular Estates Matters report. So a number of issues for decision set out paragraph 2.1 through to 2.5. 2.1 is provision for new works at Castle Park Centre and the requirement for an easement, the extinguishment of an existing easement and the relocation of a car park area, and works to be done on a landowner's property. So the request there for council to enter into an agreement with the landowner and an adjustment to the land. 2.2 then is a request from a resident to discharge into Middle Loch, having received a consent to discharge from NIEA. 2.3 is a request from Friends of Loch Macrory for lands at Ballybrack Road, Old Drummond, Loch Macrory. And we've now had feedback from Land and Property Service that the £1 doesn't represent value for money, and they've come back with a current annual market rent at £4,600. So for council to be able to enter into a lease at less than market value, we would have to obtain ministerial approval. So we would need to make a submission in that respect to the Department for Communities, Local Government and Housing Regulation division seeking approval to enter into a nominal rental 99-year lease based upon the community benefit that would be derived from the proposals put forward by the Friends of Loch Macrory. 2.4 then is a request from Owen Kilview Development Company for a sublease with Gorchin Wellbeing Collective, and as set out there, the company has confirmed that the sublease will be a nominal rental, and it's recommended the council approves the proposed subleasing arrangements. Paragraph 2.5 then sets out a number of terms routine requests for use of council property. This is Castle Archdale Forest from Fermanagh Orienteers, from the Enniskillen Royal Grammar School for the use of the car park at the Round O, from the Omagh Rotary Club for the use of the pavement area at 1 Market Street in Omagh for events in December. 2.6 then is a number of retrospective approvals for use of council property as set out in 2.61 to 2.65. Section 3 then sets out some issues for information, and these are related to the use of council venues and facilities across the last month. So they're really set out, and 3.2 is sealing of documents. So the recommendations are set out in 9.1 1 to 9.16, and that's the council approves, and in 9.2, 9.27, 9.28 that the council notes the use of the council venues and facilities.
Thank you, John. And first of all, we're going to go to Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly on WebEx.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to seek some clarity maybe from John in relation to item 2.3. Now, I don't know the area in Loch Macrory at all. It's more the principle that I'm querying in terms of the nominal rent not representing value for money. We've had various leases through in the past where a nominal rent has been agreed, and I wasn't aware that it required ministerial approval. My question would be, in terms of the valuation of the market rent, has consideration been given to the community benefit? This will negate the need for the council to maintain this property? Has those costs been fed into the value that could be charged per annum? You know, I think this could be a barrier for community groups, and I'm concerned about the implications down the line for other groups. You know, I know in the past we've talked about groups taking on perhaps things like soccer pitches and the maintenance of them. I mean, why would they if they're going to be charged a rate like this per annum? I just wondered, has something changed, or is this the way things have been done in the past and I just wasn't aware of it? Just want to seek a bit of clarity on that, John, to understand it.
I'm going to go back to Officer John Hughes on this.
Thank you, Chair. No, I suppose just to reassure members, there hasn't been any change. The proposal for a nominal rental and the agreement or the approval that was sought previously from members, that would be normal course. Where there's community benefit, we would frequently bring forward recommendations for a nominal rental, but that's always subject to an assessment of the rental value by LPS. LPS will take into account a number of factors. On this occasion, LPS have come back and assessed that the market value of the rent is £4,600. So it's not that at this stage this proposal isn't that we would exercise that rental value to the Friends of Loch McCrory. It's that we would enter in to the agreement with the community organisation at the nominal rent, but to enter into the agreement with the community organisation at the nominal rental, it requires a ministerial approval. So therefore, it has to be referred to the Department for Communities. Now, we have been in contact with the Department for Communities, and obviously with the developments last week in terms of a minister, and it was something that DFC officials are considering as to what impact this may now have on those ministerial approvals being obtained or being processed, and we'll await further information from DFC in that regard as in terms of the timelines for an approval.
Thank you, John. We'll go to Councillor Emmett McAleer in the
Can I come
chamber.
back on that, just?
Sorry, yeah, hold on, if you don't mind.
Sorry,
getting
just,
away there,
just a
Emmett.
quick, and
Go
that,
ahead,
John,
Anne-Marie.
is it possible to ask Land and Property Services to review the valuation? Because that, I mean, if, who knows when we're going to have an executive there again, if this is going to delay, you know, community groups and so on from moving forward with projects. You know, I don't think that a market value rent is necessary when it's for community benefit. I just think that understand what John's saying, that this is something that, you know, he doesn't anticipate that we'll enter into an annual market rent value on a lease, but it just seems to be creating an extra level of bureaucracy into this. I think that the valuation should be looking at the whole package, that if it's something for community benefit, it's not for commercial benefit in any way. I just think maybe how it has been assessed, a question whether that's correct, whether they're looking at it in the correct way, and is there a value in getting it reassessed?
We can go back and ask LPS, but I think we have to go back to LPS, and the LPS have determined a value at this point. It's they will take into consideration the matters that they will take into consideration. They're the competent body that we would look to in terms of coming up with a valuation. So while we can obviously ask them to review their evaluation, I wouldn't be hopeful that it would necessarily revert to a nominal value of £1, regardless of what value of what process they go through. But yes, we can ask them to review it. But I suppose that's where the regulations, the provisions allow for us to enter into an agreement below market value, but it's subject to getting the necessary ministerial approvals. And said we're advised that DFC are looking at what arrangements, what contingencies can be now put in place in that respect, given developments with ministers last week.
Okay, thank you, John. Now I'm going to go
So
to.
can I make that a proposal then to ask for it to be reassessed, please? Because it's not going to delay the lease any further because there is no minister. So just I would propose that we ask for that to be reassessed and consider the community benefit and the reduction in maintenance costs for council. They should be offset against any valuation that is considered for the value of the market rent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anne-Marie. Councillor Emmett McAleer.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll start by thanking the Director because of the number of queries in relation to this paper, and I appreciate he's got back to me in a fairly short time frame on most of them here. And I would have concerns, I suppose, just running through the first one. Like, I would take local guidance on that, presuming there's no issues in terms of the easements that are being sought. That I'd be happy enough, I suppose, giving guidance from councillors in the Lisnaskea area. The second, 2.2, and the discharge consent that's been sought, from the response I've received, just I believe that we are currently awaiting a copy of the consent discharge, if I'm right in saying that. So I would be minded that until we have actually received that and had sight of it, I wouldn't really be happy just to grant discharge or follow through on granting this discharge into a lock. There's something that just doesn't sit right with me without seeing what exactly we're given approval for. In terms of the proposal in Loch McCrory, my reading on that is that we're proceeding as instructed with the nominal fee. I'm aware of issues in other councils where, in relation to land and property service and renting or selling at a below market value has caused serious concern and serious legal implications. So I think it is only right and proper that we do follow that procedure to keep ourselves right. But I would be very confident that when that process is completed, they'll see the community benefit derived from the proposals as noted in the report. So I have no issue in terms of proceeding with that. And I've been trying to suss out and follow out on 2.4, but from what I can understand, all the boxes seem to be ticked there. So I'm happy enough to propose the paper as noted and propose the directions as followed or as noted, just with the exception of 2.2. And I think we should bring that back to a future meeting whenever the documentation has been received from NIEA. So I would make that as a proposal, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emmett. And next we go to Councillor Thomas O'Reilly on WebEx.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd be happy to second Anne-Marie's proposal, and then likewise to Emmett there, following up on the Killafole lock discharge there, and trying to get a little bit better understanding from John as to exactly what and why we would be given an easement there at all to go into a lock that we're trying to develop as a tourism node within that area, and the work that's commenced on trying to improve it. Is there other discharge consents into that lock at the moment? How many is there? For what? I think it's very important that we are very aware of what we're trying to do on the one hand to develop this as a pristine scenic area for both locals and tourists, and then on the other hand grant easements of discharge. So maybe John could enlighten me a little bit more on that.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the NIEA, or the competent body in terms of the consent to discharge, so the request to council is for a grant of easement for that purpose. So it's certainly any grant of our easement would be subject to evidence that the NIEA consent to discharge has been granted, and at this point in time we're waiting on a copy of the NIEA consent to discharge from the applicant or the requester. In this case, I think the consent to discharge would be going to the resident who has applied for the consent, and it would be them that we'll seek a copy of the consent from. But say NIEA would be the competent body, and what's being asked of us is a grant of easement rather than we're not being asked, or council isn't being asked to the consent to discharge. As to this was the second part of the question as to the number of other existing consents into the lock and for what purposes, I don't have that information, and would have to make further inquiries.
Chair, can I just ask John, are we talking about because NIEA and their sort of wide variation on consent to discharge into our locks and rivers doesn't fill me with any great confidence. Are we talking about here a private dwelling with this is a septic tank? Would you believe discharge that when it has went through the septic tank, we're discharging that fairly clean water into the river? Is that what we're talking about here, or into the lock?
As I understand, the consent that is issued is based on the discharge of the NIA terminology is sewage effluent, and that's we've translated sewage effluent in this paper to mean sewage and drainage. So yeah, it's sewage effluent. That's what NIA have granted the consent to discharge on the basis of.
Well, Chair, in that case, I'm happy to second Emmett that we hold this till we find out exactly what sewerage we're talking about. Is this a private dwelling? Like, I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable that we would be agreeing to something when we don't have the information. So I'm happy to second Emmett's as well.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas. And next we go to Councillor Adam Gannon in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to briefly come in on two
0.63 there in Rusheen Park. And just to take the opportunity to congratulate Devonish there on the very successful 5-10K run. About 350 taking part and a massive amount raised for charity. So big well done to all who took part, and to all the organisers. Would have loved to have been there myself, but for obvious injury reasons I wouldn't have been fit to go along 5-10K in the crutches. But looking forward to hopefully taking part in it next year. But well done to all at the club. Brilliant achievement.
Thank you, Adam. And next we go to Councillor Josephine Deegan on WebEx.
Thank you, Chair, and Chair, thanks to John for his very comprehensive report. I want to support Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly in her comments in relation to item 2.3 there, Chair, the lands at Ballybrack Road, Altdrumman. I mean, under normal political circumstances, Chair, I think it would be reasonable for us to ask for ministerial approval. But Councillor Donnelly is quite right in what she says. I mean, when will that happen? This is a very serious matter for community groups, and particularly for the community groups at Lough Macrory. And I suppose my question really is, in Land and Property Services making these recommendations under these circumstances, do they usually consider the community benefits? But because my understanding is that the reason we are offering this at a nominal rent is purely for the purpose of supporting communities and assisting in their development. Is that not an underlying principle in these circumstances? And secondly then, Chair, I do want to support Councillor Emmett McAleer, seconded by Councillor O'Reilly, that we do get further information on sewage effluent discharges. I think that's potentially a very serious matter. It may be setting a precedent, and I certainly think that we should pause this approval until we have further information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Seamus Green, IT is going to come on and see if they can assist you. Seamus is having some internet problems. Next we go to Councillor Victor Warrington in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. Well, obviously, some of the previous speakers have highlighted on item 2.2 the discharge into Killafola, and I certainly would be very supportive of that. That we don't go ahead and rubber stamp this recommendation tonight. The bottom line is we're spending hundreds of thousands on Killafola to enhance the area for the community. And you know, let's be honest, I know people that swim in Killafola, and I can't swim anyway, but I personally wouldn't fancy getting into a lake where there was potential effluent, and I'm being polite, that potential effluent floating about, and I certainly would be supportive of holding the recommendation on that till we get more information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Victor. And finally, I'm going to Councillor, oh, there's Councillor Paul Robinson as well. I'll go to Councillor Donal Coffey in the chamber first.
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to support the suggestion that we seek further information on this, but my point I wanted to make was really it is the advice of the Northern Ireland Environment Agency that no one in this council area should swim anywhere in the wild because the chronic state of our water infrastructure means basically it's unsafe, and that's just that's been confirmed in black and white that even in authorized zones, you shouldn't swim even a few days after heavy rain. But as there are no authorized zones for freshwater swimming, it's actually the advice of the statutory body that no one should be swimming in any water course in our council area, and that's the state of things as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. And finally, I go to Councillor Paul Robinson on WebEx.
Thank you, Chair. No, I wouldn't be happy with that either, Killafola. I think we should be holding it as well. That's why that's all I'm going to say on the minute.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So I'm getting a general consensus here that that we go with the recommendations apart from item 912, and we await further information on that one there. So unless I hear any different from the chamber or see anybody indicating on WebEx, I'm going to take it that we're accepting the officer's recommendations apart from 912. And I'm not seeing anybody indicating. And then we have the proposal from Anne-Marie Donnelly, seconded by Councillor Riley, to write to the Land and Property Service to ask them to review the Loch McCrory and in future to take into consideration costs that the council may incur if they were to retain the property. Is that correct, Anne-Marie?
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
And I'm not seeing, is there any dissent to that? Sorry. So I'm going to bring Officer John Hughes in here before we go any further.
Sorry, Chair, just to update members, LPS will have been provided with all of the information about the community benefit and the council costs that are associated with the site. As officers, I think our estimation is that this reflects a more diligent approach being applied by LPS as a result of developments in the other council area that Councillor McAleer referred to, and I suppose that an LPS that the LPS valuation wouldn't be relied on to put this onto the market or anything other than the market value. So I think this valuation is reflective of an audit report in another council.
John, can I come in on that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I'm going to let you in on that because obviously that's an interesting aspect on it.
I understand the case that Councillor McAleer referred to and John Hughes there. That was a commercial venture in terms of I am solely interested in community leases. I am not, if it's something's commercial, of course, full market value should be charged for whether it's rent or for a disposal. But I'm concerned that we should be looking at things with a view that if something's for community benefit, market value, yes, should be worked out, but we should be backtracking and assessing the costs incurred or the costs that the council will not incur as a result of something being leased to a community group. It's enabling the council to offset costs that they would necessarily incur and liability for any public liability or whatever as well. So they're two different things. It's not the same as the case that Councillor McAleer is mentioning. It's purely community use. So I do want it to be referred back to make sure that it has been fully assessed.
I'm going to let John Hughes in just briefly here again.
Thank you, Chair. And so I appreciate all of the comments and we can write back to LPS. I think this will boil down to LPS have to come back with a market valuation. There is a procedure that's currently prescribed for council to enter into an agreement, a lease, an arrangement below market value, and that requires ministerial approval, and that's the approved process. I would have to say I think we can ask LPS to review their valuation. That's unlikely to change, and the process will still remain on that it requires a ministerial approval through the Department for Communities. And as I said, we have been in touch with DFC, and officers within DFC are considering what alternative arrangements may be put in place in the context of the current situation within the departments.
Okay. I think we're sort of at a problem here, Anne-Marie. We can send the letter and ask them to review it, but I think we're better to continue with the process as well and ask them to review it. And from what John is saying, I don't believe they're going to come back and say that our valuation is, they're still going to come in with a higher valuation. And then we're still at the same position where we still have to write with the minister, even if it only is, if they say it's £5 a year. My understanding is if we say £1, then we have to explain why we're going with the £1 and then get ministerial approval. So we can write and ask them to review it, but I think we allow the other process to run in tandem. Is that Okay,
That's fine, but I still want it to be reassessed because ultimately we don't have a minister at the moment. And I don't want this to delay any other similar leases for other community groups. And I do, it's obviously set out in legislation, I'm assuming that, a minister must sign off on something that is below market value for rent. So there won't be a workaround because they won't be able to change legislation when there's no assembly. So it will just sit until there's a minister in place. So it'll only be below market value if that's what LPS determine that it is. I just want to make sure that they've borne in mind all the maintenance costs to the council in light of their valuation. Have they offset all that? That's all I'm asking. So if they can just review that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
that's okay. Then I'm not seeing any other, sorry, Emmett, are you coming in on this? You have spoken on this before, so it's something to clear.
I appreciate that, Chair, and I will be very brief. I don't think anybody's disagreeing with what Councillor Donnelly's saying there. I think the matter of fact is quite rightly, I think as the director says, the chances of getting a different valuation is highly unlikely. And the takeaway from this evening's meeting and what we're actually proposing and approving here is that we are proceeding with the nominal valuation, and we're then waiting to hear back or hear confirmation from that, because as the councillor has spoken and other councillors have suggested, the value to the community should be enough to allow for that nominal valuation. But the process has to be followed, which maybe was the issue in other councils that I'm not going to speak on, not going to dwell on, but we just have to be seen to keep ourselves right. But I think the proposal tonight is looking after the residents of Loch McCrory and the friends of Loch McCrory, and it's also protecting the council as well. So I think that just has to be noted as well, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmett. Donald, briefly here.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just, I would be uncomfortable with the notion that we would be going back to seek a revaluation of property, as if, that would be appropriate, because obviously that might set a precedent for other things. But where I think there was an argument made there by Councillor Donnelly that, that there are what I would term maybe perhaps opportunity costs associated with the do nothing option, which is basically that there would be maintenance costs, other now that's not the gainsay or undercut the existing valuation, but have we produced any analysis of the do nothing option, and by comparison then to arrive at perhaps it is possible that the do nothing option may actually be more expensive than the do something option in terms of leasing this out. So I'm just wondering if that might be a way to resolve it without going back to a non-existent minister. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Stephen McCann on WebEx, if you come in there quickly, we were closing this item up.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll be very brief, and apologies if this question has been answered already. Has there been a change in procedure within the LPS as to how they would deal with these sorts of requests, or has the process always been we would seek their valuation and then approach community groups?
I'll stop you there, Stephen. Yes, the officer covered that earlier. That is the procedure. It's just in some other areas that may have been ignored. But that was the procedure, and that is the procedure.
Okay, so just clarity on that, John, because I'm not clear. So in the past, have we always sought ministerial approval for any lands that were given away rental or disposal for nominal value?
I'll bring in Officer John News. Sorry, Officer John Boyle.
Chair, it's my understanding that it was a direction coming from the department since all of the issues raised in another council, and that was a direction that if we were given, or if we were dealing with a community group or indeed a commercial premises at anything below market value, that it needed ministerial approval, and that was within the last 12 months.
Okay. So I think we're settled that we're still going to write the letter to see if it can be reviewed, and I'm going to close that off. Unless there's somebody who's opposing, I want to close this off and we move on. Okay. Thank you. Next we go on to item 5.2, and that's again going to address some of the items which is raised under our any other business or correction matters arising.
Thank you, Chair. Just item 5.2 is Director's Report. There's 4 items in it, and I want to start with, if I can, with 2 apologies. In the recommendations at the very end, I had erroneously included a reference to another matter which members had discussed at last month's, which was about the potential for service level agreements for Christmas trees, and there's a recommendation included there. Members should have received an email this afternoon just advising that the recommendation at 8.24 in the paper that was uploaded on decision time, that's a typographical error and shouldn't have been included, because there is no information in the paper on that particular topic. So I just want to apologise for that first typo. And the second typo that I'd like to apologise for is in Appendix 1 within this paper, at the top of page 3. There's a reference to the Council's aim to be a net zero estate by, it says 2036. That should of course be 2036. So I want to clear those 2 typos up at the outset of the paper. If I come back to the substance of the paper, there's a number of one matter for decision, and this consultation response on future network for all NAE networks RP7 price control or approach to planning for 2025 to 2031. This consultation came into Council at very short notice last month and was flagged verbally at the Policy and Resources Committee that we would bring the consultation response to tonight's meeting. So the response is set out within Appendix 1 of this paper, and references in particular work that's been going on through the Fermanagh Local Development Plan, work that can be done to facilitate net zero through a flexible and integrated energy system, and then work to be done around maintaining safe, reliable and resilient network meeting the needs of customers. We have also in the last section of the response, NAA had asked respondents to prioritise 10 items that were identified within the consultation paper. So the officer's proposed recommendation of that prioritisation is set out on page 3 of the response. And the conclusion that there is that we obviously welcome the opportunity to submit a consultation and look forward to partnership working and collaborative working with them in the future. So that's at 2.1, and that's really for decision. Matters 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4 are provided for information. The first is in reference to an update on cottage lawn scoping exercise. Members referenced at last Environment and Services, and in particular work that officers have been doing to develop a community engagement survey, and a copy of that survey which we'd expect to release over during this month, and keep that open for at least 8 weeks, but recognise that will take us up into the Christmas period, so it may be extended over the Christmas period to enable responses to come in. A copy of that is set out in Appendix 2 of the paper for members for information. Item 2.3, member had asked for a report on the provision of sanitary bins and male toilets in council-owned public conveniences. So the paper sets out information in that respect. We have engaged with the current provider to seek a quotation for a cost if we were to extend the provision of sanitary bins into all male toilets, and the cost, it's estimated at least £3,430 on an annual basis to include that provision. It is, however, noted that if we, in reverting to single accessible units across the PC estate, that will actually mean that there will be sanitary bins available to all service users in those PCs. And finally, 2.4 is an update or a report on provision of chemical disposal toilet pods for motorhomes. It was discussed by members at Environment Services Committee last month. A report on the provision of chemical disposal toilets come to a future meeting. So we've just set out some information there about options and about the Information that's available on the Campaign for Real Heirs UK website. That they can the nature of that provision can range from very basic to more elaborate bespoke structures. We have provided information on 2 potential options that will also then respect the barrier controls that we've introduced at the round O. Obviously, the costs are set out for either of those 2 options, but it's noted that that excludes those costs are for the capital costs associated with the provision of that service, and exclude recurrent operating, cleaning and maintenance costs, which would increase the overall cost again. But note that there is no budget provision for that in our current budgets. And the information is provided for information at this point in time. So the recommendations are set out in section 8 that council approves the draft response consultation to the NE networks, and then 8.21 notes the update for Cottage Lawn Belcoo, the update in the provision of sanitary bins and meal public convenience, and notes the update in terms of provision of chemical disposal toilet pod at the round O.
Thank you, John. I'm going to go Councillor Bert Wilson first.
Chair, the declaration of interest that I made should have read 9.2, not 12. It's to do with the public inquiry into the A5 that will be taking place.
Thank you, Bert.
Thank you.
Next, I'm going to actually, Councillor Earl Thompson, you'd come in on this and I had shut you down. I'm going to bring you in first here. Okay, thank you, Earl.
Thank you, Earl. Yes, so I'm speaking on 2.3 regarding the sanitary bins, which, as Earl said, I raised last month. I have just 4 quick questions, I suppose. So 2.3.2 says that the annual cost is 3,430. My assumption would be that would be a one-off cost because you just have to buy the bins, and the sanitary bins are already being emptied in the female toilets anyway. I appreciate that there is budgetary concerns, and I think all councillors are aware of that. But would it even be possible if we trial them and see if there is a need, perhaps in the urban centres? Could then you note that the officers think that there isn't a need for them. Could you advise as how we can go about proving there is a need or investigating that there is a need? I also have concerns that there's an equality issue along gender lines here, but I don't think it's the time to make it that argument. And lastly, is it possible to at least implement this provision as policy, at least in theory? So when the time comes and our finances are a bit more in order, and I think we need to remain positive that that time will come, that we're up and ready to go. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to bring John News in on this. There's a few items he needs to clear up.
Sorry, Chair. Just in respect of the annual cost, that's not a one-off capital cost. That would be the cost of servicing the bins. It would be it's a provider that would come in and empty the bins on an ongoing basis. So it's an annual. That would be a recurrent cost. So rather than a one-off cost. I suppose as regards the proposal to trial in urban centres, I suppose I would be cautious about that approach, because obviously in bringing forward any policy, it would obviously be subject to rural impact assessment. So just to bring something forward on that basis, I would just note that point. And there was a reference that we should try and prove that there is a need. I suppose at the minute we haven't. A need hasn't been identified, and as was I suppose tried to set out in the paper that if we look to revert to single accessible unit provision across the public convenience estate, then in providing a single accessible unit or one or more single accessible units across the PC estate, then there will be a sanitary bin in all of those accessible units, so that it'll be it's the same unit that would be used regardless of gender. So I think that the direction of travel in that regard would address that the gender equality issue. So hopefully that's addressing the points that have been raised.
Thank you. I'll bring you in next, Earl.
Thank you very much, Chair, and some good points raised by Councillor Bell there. I'm just, and you know, the equality thing, and we have been asked, you know, we wouldn't have brought this up if it hadn't have been an issue out there. I mean, Councillor Bell was getting emails, I was getting emails, I'm sure others were as well as us. So it is an important issue out there. I'm just wondering, Director John Hughes, is there any sort of a timeline where you see your, you know, the single unit that you refer to here? Is there any sort of timeline when that'll be, if we're moving towards? Because, you know, at this minute in time, there's male and female there, and you're talking about the single unit as we move forward. Have you got a timeline when all that will be completed, and that we can ensure that it's there's gender equality there?
And I suppose in respect of the single accessible units, I suppose we moved to single accessible units during COVID. In terms of the provision of that space and the provision of services, and that's something that we could that could be implemented at relatively short notice across our existing estate. However, in terms of looking at the modernisation and improvement of the public convenience estate, and I appreciate that will be something that we'll have to review in terms of capital plans and capital investments. We've had workshops with members over the last year where we had looked at capital investment programme over a number of years, certainly over a 7-year period in the first instance, and that was with a view to upgrading our public convenience estate. Now, that is obviously subject to the existing capital pressures and budgetary pressures facing council generally at this point in time, but the intention would be as we upgrade these facilities that's where we move to a single accessible unit for everybody regardless of gender, regardless of disability.
Hold on there, Chair. Thanks for that, John. I'm just wondering, is there any sort of a mileage that we can, and I know I don't want to be basing urban against rural, what have you. Is there any mileage of, saying, for example, a pilot type project on this?
Do you want to come back in there, John?
I would say is that there's no additional budgetary provision in the current year. Obviously, we're starting the estimates process for future years, and you know we can look at what proposals can be developed in the context of that estimates process for 23-24. But it would be wrong of me, I think, to preempt that process at this point in time.
Okay, Chair, I'm happy to propose that report, or that item on that report, just at this stage, and I'm sure Councillor Bell will second it for the noting of it at this stage. Hopefully further work will be carried out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next I'm going to go to Adam Gannon, whom I'm sure will be talking about Cottage Green.
Obviously I've spoke about it a lot, Chair. Thank you. Thanks to the officers for their quick work on this. I know I put deadlines on them, and thank you. I appreciate that it's coming in to us now. I've 2 questions and kind of a proposal to looking at that community survey. The first, it would be, what would be the proposed start and estimated finish date of the consultation? I know they said they'd need to give notice of Christmas, and that's fair enough. So when would we be looking to launch it, and when would it then conclude? And the second thing is, I was obviously looking at the community survey, and given that it was the question of lighting, which brought this whole thing about, there's not a mention of it on the survey. So I would propose that in the survey, we include 2 additional questions. One, now obviously this wording isn't prescriptive, it can be changed slightly by those who are making it to optimize it. But something along the lines of, would you like to have the path, or would you like to have lighting on the paths or around the paths of the cottage lawn? Because again, we want to gauge the public's opinion on that. And the second thing is, how would lighting impact your use of the cottage lawn, and then maybe some sort of sliding scale from greatly increase, neither positive, negative, you know, that sort of thing, with 5 points or whatever the survey creators think would be the most appropriate way for measuring that. So I propose that we add those 2 questions in, or 2 questions that are similarly worded, and if I could maybe just get a wee answer on the start and finish proposals or estimates. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going over to Officer John New.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the member. In terms of the start and end date of the consultation, as was said in the report, the intention would be to deploy it in November. Obviously, if there's further refinement or work required on the survey, that'll take just a few days for us to work through that process. But certainly the intention would be, we'd deploy it as quickly as possible during November. That may not be this week, it could be in the next week, or maybe, that will depend on how much work needs to be done in terms of the survey and the questions. And I suppose good practice would be that it would be open for at least 8 weeks, but I am conscious that in keeping it open for 8 weeks at this point in time, that will take us over the Christmas period. So it may be prudent that we keep it open, for a week or 2 longer, so that takes us into the January period. So that hopefully that answers the query around lighting. In terms of the 2 additional questions, I suppose what we've been trying to do is make sure that the survey isn't leading in any way. There's an open format question at question 9. Where we're inviting all respondents to identify any improvements that they would like to suggest, and this was that's deliberately left as in an open format, just as at question 6 we've left an open format as to what topics any respondents feel are important. So I think there is scope for respondents who feel strongly about any topic, but I appreciate the context of the driver for this from the member was around the provision of lighting, and so certainly if that's what members would like us to do is include additional questions. But I said I know from a survey development point of view we just do need to be cautious around asking pre-framing questions.
Go ahead, Adam.
I don't accept the director's opinion on those particular questions simply because there's other questions in there that would be considered leading. If you look at question 5, 7 and 8, all are given suggestions to people, and that would be leading them down a path. And at the end of the day, this is about lighting, and we need the public's opinion on it. And if it's a no, if the public resoundingly say no, they would not like lighting, that's the result of it. I don't think that'll be the result, but I think it's essential that question's asked, and hopefully my proposal to include it will be seconded. Thank you.
Okay, and next we go to Councillor Anthony Philip.
Thank you, Chair. And I had a few questions to ask and make a few comments, but in case I forget, I'll second Adam's proposal there. On the same view as Adam, I don't think it would be misleading, and other questions is kind of going the similar way the other way. Yeah, looking through the other questions, yeah, dead on, no bother with them at all, and I'm glad that we've got to this stage. It has been a long time working at this, years, as a matter of fact. And another question I was going to ask there is it going to be all online, John, or would it be paper copies sent out to anybody, or how would members of the public get access to it? Like if older people wasn't online and wasn't fit to do it, businesses and people like that there, because the most people that fill this in, the better. Like we want to have as many people as possible fill it in, and a wider area. I see this question about how far away you live from it as well. So I think we'd want to have I know a lot of people would be handy doing it online and all that, but still a lot of people not online, and just wonder if there's any way for them doing paper forms. But I'd second it. And if it has to be proposed or second as well, is it all going to be done individually? I propose that it as well.
Thank you, Anthony. John, do you want to come back on that issue with the online?
Certainly, Chair. Our intention would be that the primary delivery for this would be online, but of course, if anybody would require a hard copy, then officers will do what we can to facilitate it. But I wouldn't be anticipating a large scale, production of paper copies to send out on a blanket. The primary intervention would be an online survey.
Okay, thank you, John. And next we go to Councillor Donald O'Coffey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In regard to the cottage lawn, I think the questions that have been asked are actually quite interesting. There's a lot around the educational signage, which I think has been improved in recent times, and I want to thank the directors for those improvements. I think it's very important that we highlight the cultural and historic, attractions in the local area around Belcoo. I also think it's very good that we have a question in there about conservation. There's a fringe to the meadow, which is a really very, very full of life environment. It's one of the few places you can see a lot of huge biodiversity. It's effectively been allowed to rewild and in the most productive manner possible on the Loch Shore. And it is somewhere where anyone can go to in a night and the peace of a night and experience genuine, a great experience, which we've lost with the Milky Way over your head. There's a lot of questions in here. There's a few things I think are obviously missing. I do note Councillor Gannon's question. I have no real objection to such a question, but I think that there are other issues that should be raised as well if we're going to raise one thing. One of the main issues that I think most people who actually walk the every day will tell you is it floods. That's one of the main issues, is the problem we have with flood water on that path. It's very seldom you go out in a certain time of year and you don't go into flood water. There's areas around the path that flood habitually, and I think that needs to be recognized in it. An issue that has been raised with me very vociferously by people who use the path every single day, and a number of people have raised it, is safety, which is not reflected in this. And in particular, they are very, very concerned, these women, that they will become targets as a result of lighting. Someone said to me, no one can see you when you're walking in the dark, and that as a young woman, she feels safe to do so. So I do think we need to recognize there is some ASB on the path. You can see all sorts of stuff occasionally happening at certain times of the year or day. And I think that our issues around safety need to be addressed in this, how we can address those concerns. There's also a question I think we need to ask around stargazing. It's not reflected in this at all. One of the great attractions of the Cottage Meadow is the fact that it is in is in a place which is, where you can still see the stars in their full glory at certain times of the year, if it's a clear sky. And I think that a lot of people do go out and have a look at that, especially with the reflection into Loch Macnain. And the other issue that I think is not, and I think it should be raised directly, is the issue of endangered species, which exist on the flight paths, in particular of some very rare bats, which, again, if you're lucky to be walking at a certain time of twilight during the summer or even early autumn or late spring, you will see them flying literally over your head. They may even touch your head. They come that closely because of the ambient light that exists in the area at the moment. So all of these things need to be considered. And I think that I'd like to see them reflected in here, because I'd like to propose that if Councillor Gannon was willing to accept the inclusion of these, because that's what we're fighting for when we're fighting for the Cottage Meadow. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we go to Councillor Bernice Swift on WebEx.
Yeah, Gura Magat, Kirloch, John. And I strongly object to Councillor Gannon's proposal, and seconded and supported there by Donal. I think, again, they've largely missed the point. It's not about fighting for the Cottage Meadow. It's about its protection. And I do feel so strongly about our dark skies that the notion of adding lights to one of the prettiest cottage meadows in the heart of our Quilca Lakelands is really anathema to me. And I must say, of the councillors who continue to promote such a travesty for the sake of a couple of votes, are flying in the face of all things biodiverse and the action to climate change, of which our council is to the forefront of. I was going to suggest at Appendix 2, question 7, I'd like to just see some expansion and explanation on what biodiversity and heritage would mean, further explaining to people who would be faced with the survey, so that they could elaborate their ideas and opinions on the same. Because the very fact that there would be a question in there is leading, in my opinion. I was glad to see it wasn't. And as you pointed out, John, there are boxes there to write in what an opinion may be, because otherwise you might as well just say, right, okay, fire up lights at the cottage meadow. Again, I'm going to mention the importance of the dark skies again. It's promoted heavily by those of us within the Cuilcagh Lakelands subcommittee group. And I know far too many people who are living in rather built up villages and of course the urban areas who cannot see the celestial beauty of the night sky due to artificial pollution. So I am very, very strongly against it. And, you know, we have been working on this for years, and I mean years, way back in Councillor Stephen Huggett's time, and it has been about the protection of the cottage lawn, sustaining its beauty and keeping it as a beautiful natural hub in that particular area of Erne West. So I do not agree with those questions suggested whatsoever, and I do feel strongly that people will write down their opinions. The issues mentioned of flooding are real, okay, and just caution on suggesting that there may be any heavy ASB in that area as well. You know, I don't like it when sort of loose words are thrown out here without being substantiated. So just would like to be careful on that. I don't want unfortunate and sensationalist headlines in papers next week on these matters. But John, just to consider maybe an expansion just on what the heritage and culture part means, because it is about protecting the whole conservation in that particular area and supporting the people. Now, look, before anybody else adds to talking about the lights again, I know we're not talking about the massive big orange lights, but any lights will impact the biodiversity in that area. Garmagat.
Thank you, Bernice. I'm going to bring John in again briefly here.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly, I've made a note of all of members' comments, and really, the update was really to note, and we'll take on board the comments and the feedback from members. A bit more work to do on the survey before we put it out, and obviously that will impact just maybe for a few days in terms of getting the survey out. But happy to take on board those comments and get the survey right before we get it out, and so a report will come back then in due course to Future Environmental Services.
Okay, thank you, John. Before I bring you in, Adam, I'm gonna just make a comment here. We have one matter for decision, which was the consultation on the future network for all an NIE, and we also have the motorhome, the Campra toilet facility, or whatever facility it is, yeah, and chemical disposal toilet pods, and though that was for Noton, and nobody has commented on those yet. So I'm bringing you in here, Adam.
Thank you, Chair, and appreciate the time just on this very important issue. Quick question for John there. I think that 5 to 8 questions might be the place to reflect some of Donald's comments regarding biodiversity and stuff that can be worked in there, and maybe some editing, and if there's an additional question needed, there's additional questions needed in that section. But I was going to say, you mentioned that it might be a bit of a delay. Obviously, I would hope it would still, after we agree this tonight, it will still go out in this month. That's what I just wanted to check, because you might have said that it was another report, but I would like to see it out this month.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry. That would absolutely be the intention, is in the report that we would get the survey out during November. Just there will be a bit of tweaking to be done to the survey based on the feedback tonight.
And are you proposing the other 2 items, Adam? Thank you. And next we go to Anthony, Councillor Anthony Feely.
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks for letting me in again. I don't usually come in to speak much at meetings, but this is I appreciate letting me in for the second time. Yeah, I just checking that Adam was happy enough with the donors 2 things in there, so I'm happy enough to second that as well. But I just want to make 1 or 2 quick comments about some of the things we said there. I just find it kind of a strange enough kind of a statement to think that ladies or girls or anybody, even men, would be safer walking in the dark than they would in the light. late. I just find it kind of strange, but that's okay. And another issue, and I said this last night too, but another issue about making politics or about votes. It's nothing to do with that at all. It's just about what's for the people. It's nothing about votes or politics at all. And but myself and Bernice, we do usually agree on a lot of things, but this is one thing that we agree to disagree on. And I think about bringing in the dark skies is a wee bit. It's not really relevant here because you wouldn't get dark skies in the Cottage Meadow any with the lights on the street right beside it. Like there's plenty of other places in Iron West we could have dark skies in. So I just think there's no need for bringing that in either. But that's it. So I just happen enough to second the amendments that Adam made.
Are you going to second the other two proposals? Thank you.
Point of order, John. And Anthony, that's very sarcastic, making that scurly laughter face. And you are out of order in suggesting that what I have said about the dark skies is not relevant. It most definitely is. And the fact that you sit on the Quilca Lakelands committee, you should be better informed on that. Gurmagat.
Okay, thank you, Bernice. Okay, so we have one item there for decision, which was the future networks, and that's proposed by Adam and seconded by Anthony. And then we have items for noting, which are 821 and 823, proposed by Adam and Anthony. And then we have 822, proposed by Matthew and seconded by Earl. Sorry, Councillor Armstrong.
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to come in and make a comment on the motorhomes. Is it possible?
Yes, it's on this subject. I didn't think anybody was going to come in on it.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to say that, yes, I note these option 1 and option 2. Is that just the costing there per unit, per facility? And how many facilities would be needed district-wide? And also, I know it's not a statutory obligation for the council, but just an update from the director, please. We had talked about looking for private sector investment in motorhome accommodation, and has there been any response to that? And could that be a solution as part of the response? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm actually going to go to Officer John Boyle for this one.
Chair, we are currently working with a private sector person who may be interested in setting up a motorhome facility in the Enniskillen area. Those discussions are ongoing at this point in time, or at a very early stage at this point in time, but it is something that our officers are very much encouraging and working with that provider in order to try and come to a solution for the Enniskillen area.
Yes.
Thanks for letting me in. And the other question about the option 1 and option 2, if that didn't come to pass, would we need a facility in each area of the district, in the Omagh area and in the Fermanagh area? Thank you.
Chair, if that's the cost for one unit, and it is costed at this stage for something that could be facilitated at the Round O in Enniskillen. As you can see from the report, there is no budget set aside for the development of this at this point in time. So if there were, how many you have in the district of those chemical toilets would certainly increase the cost per unit.
Okay, thank you. So we have 3 proposals to note, and one there was for decision. Is there anybody dissenting to the one we have to make a decision on? I'm not seeing anybody indicating. So that's that matter, that paper dealt with. Next paper we go to is paper 6.1, and that's our now monthly street naming and numbering. I'd like to point out to councillors, as this has been brought up now on a couple of occasions, these come back to the council at every meeting because of our council policy, and we do have a policy which clearly is covered. And it says residual discretion and protections and mitigations. And that's what you're going to be talking on if there's any of those that apply to any of these. Okay, so I'm going first of all to Officer John Boyle.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you say, this is now the standard monthly report. I think I reported a number of months ago that we had over 350 applications for dual language signage on streets and road names, and we are trying to work through them as quickly as possible in order to get approval through the council here, through the process that was agreed through our policy. You will see in Table 1 the list of the road names, and we are taking them in the order in which we received them for a request. So you will see the list of road and street names that have been assessed and are before members in this month. You will also see that the 15% as per our policy hasn't been met for Barney Heights, School Lane, Killycahar Road, for Cara Road, and Glendore Wood, and therefore in accordance with the policy, the application process ends in this regard. In 2.7, you will see the Irish names for the official road names. There is one which we have checked out with the independent translator. The origin of the name Ashmina is still unknown. So it is the practice to keep it in English until the original Irish version of the name is actually known. We will continue to work with the independent translator in that regard. With regard to the resource implications, the average cost for staffing remains at £925 per application. It is quite intensive process in order to assess the electoral register and all the various searches that need to be undertaken. And then for the supply and installation, the rural plastic sign is at a cost of £450, while the urban galvanised steel signs are at a cost of £560. And you'll see for the names that are being proposed for dual language, there's a total cost of £32,710. So, Chair, it's recommended that the Council approves the installation of the dual language signage for the street and road names in Section 2.7 of the report in accordance with our street and road naming and numbering policy. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, all, John. And first we go to Councillor Matthew Bell in the Chamber.
Thank you, Chair. And I just have a comment to make. There's a number of roads here which received no responses. So Barney Heights, School and School Lane. There's also another road which every single response was negative. They didn't want Irish signage. And then there's two other roads, each with over 100 people on the register, and neither of them was able to get over 20 responses. Now, it leads me to suspect that the roads which received no responses, it wasn't actually the residents who requested the survey. Otherwise, you would expect there would be at least one positive response from the person who requested it. Now, whenever this policy was being discussed last year, there was assurances made by certain councillors that the councillors wouldn't be forcing the Irish language or Irish language dual signage upon anyone. But to me, it seems that is a possibility. But I will leave my comments with a question, and just to confirm that it's £950 per application, and does that include if the application fails? So does that mean this report shows that there's just shy of £5,000 of wasted money, basically? Thank you, Chair.
Go to Officer John Boyle.
Yeah. Chair, it wouldn't quite be the £5,000 because some of the work would take place following the decision by members here. But certainly it's estimated, and it is a round figure, and it would all depend on the number of applications or a number of people who are on their electoral register and everything like that on each individual road. To give a report of the cost of staff time per road. Now that would take an inordinate amount of allocating time to individual people, and that I think the value for money for that would be lost. So I suppose in the question how much is lost from those roads who didn't meet the criteria, I couldn't exactly say what that is in terms of staff time.
I'm just going to let you in briefly here, Matthew.
That's fair enough, and I wouldn't ask for that report to come back because money's already been wasted on this, in my opinion. But you can confirm that there has been resources wasted in terms of council staff and council resources for roads that received no responses. That like money has been spent on that. You can confirm that. Thank you.
I'll confirm, Chair, that yes, staff time has been spent with in assessing, in going to the electoral office, getting the names, sending out applications or whatever. Money has been spent in that regard, in regards of staff time.
Thank you, John. And next we go to Councillor Bert Wilson.
Yes, Chair. Kiln Woods Avenue, that if we were to take that as a number that either ignored it or else voted against it, there was 75.7% on that road not registered, didn't ask for signs of any kind. And Mina Road, 69% either ignored it or voted against it. On Terraquin Road, 66.2 either ignored it or didn't bother. And on Kiln Road, 73.5% ignored it or didn't vote. Forest View, 74% either ignored it or didn't vote against it. So to me, if that's democracy, I'm in the wrong place, because 15% can overrule everybody else on them roads that doesn't either want it or else ignored it. That to me is not democracy. As well as that, if there were two, Reculpa Road and Main Street, Mountfield, did one was 69% and the other 53%. That's over 51, and that's fair enough. That's democracy. But if we had went by that, instead of paying out 32,710, we would have been paying out £6,850 to do those two roads, and that is, to me, I don't agree with. I'm a Democrat and I agree with 51%, but I do not agree with 15%, and that's there. The people in them roads are being overruled.
Thank you, Bert. But it is council policy at the moment.
That's council policy, but it's not a democratic policy.
Next, I'm going to Councillor Tommy Maguire.
Gora Margaret Carney, thank you, Chair, and I would like to propose the recommendation. And I see from the information I received that the policy is being adhered to, and indeed the reporting every month to this committee was a safeguard to alleviate the fears of councillors that it was going to be forced on people, and obviously from the reports it's not being forced on anyone at all. If people don't choose to go along with the dual signage, that's their choice. So I am more than happy to propose the recommendation, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. Next we go to Councillor Robert Irvine.
I just want to concur with the comments made by my colleague Councillor Bell in regard to the lack of response from some of the roads, and I'd just like to thank the officer, the director, John Boyle, for replying to my query in regard to whether it was general public or councillors instigated the requests on all the roads. I thank him for the information that he supplied. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Next we go to Councillor Earl Thompson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I think all the points have been made by colleagues and maybe in the bench in front of me here. Just on behalf of the Democratic Unionist Party grouping on this council, we will be voting against the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, next we go to Councillor Adam Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. Anytime we reach this item, nearly every month guaranteed, there's always some sort of issue and some sort of problem. And they're not problems with, say, translations or maybe representations being made that a sign can't be put on the road. It seems to be ways to try and frustrate it and to try and just undermine the policy. And with the great respect, it always seems to be the Ulster Unionist Party here doing this for some reason. You know, suggestions that the Irish language, the councillors are forcing the Irish language upon people who don't want it, is ridiculous, simply by the fact that you can see that there's roads that aren't getting dual language signs here, no matter who instigated it. So there's roads that haven't met the policy. So it's not being forced on people. You know, this comes out of capital budget, and capital, as we've discussed before, cannot be moved for day-to-day costs. So it's not like we could even use the money to cover day-to-day running costs. If we could, it might be a different discussion, but we can't. And the budget was agreed and budgeted for, which means we work up to that and we use it. Now, budgets for next year, that's a discussion that we'll be having. But if you don't like the policy, I believe the time, if they want to bring a motion to change it, they can. I think it would fail. But I think this fairly pedantic attempts to undermine council policy just needs to stop, Chair. I'm happy to second the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we go to Councillor Donald O'Coffey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My opinions on this policy are fairly well aired at this stage. So I wanted to come in on the issue that Adam Gannon, Councillor Gannon, suggested that there wasn't a problem with, which is the translation issue. I welcome the fact that we have not sought to impose an incorrect interpretation to Ashmina. It's something that has not been amenable to translation, but it is possible that it is one of the 10% of townlands that has not got an Irish language known etymology, and probably belongs to the Afro-Asiatic language that was the original languages spoken on this island and the adjoining one, and in fact, Western Europe. But I'm just wondering whether the one that I'm really raising is the issue of the Rarach na Fáirse, which to me is basically, it's what Irish speakers would call Bearlachas. It's an English language equivalent that's been incorporated into the Irish language. And I happen to be reading a book by Mankin Magan, who is an Irish language fluent native speaker, who's written a number of books on the importance of the Irish culture. Very interesting person. And one of the points he raises actually was the difference between the concept of forest and woodland. And the woodland is a much more indigenous concept than the forest. So it's no surprise really that the word we've used for forest is basically has its roots in English. So I'm wondering, in Irish, of course, forests and woodlands are actually named after the trees that predominate in them, whether it's a dar or a kill, and many other. There's all sorts of forests in the Irish language, or woodlands rather. And I'm wondering if there could not be a review done to see whether that we could improve on the translation of that, because to me that's a missed opportunity, that name there. I'd like to see something more, because obviously that forest relates to a forest, and perhaps it may be an indigenous forest, one of the few that's left in any way on this island where we've hardly any trees left of the original stock. But it might be that may be better translated. I'm just wondering if anyone has considered that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Donald. Next we go to Councillor Seamus Green on WebEx.
Thank you, Chair. Just to comment on a number of things there that was said, mostly by the good old Ulster Unionist Party that always comes in on this item. It's good to see their oldest and their youngest councillor following suit. It's all things Irish seems to be in their sights. It's at every council meeting that anything Irish is mentioned, they come in on top of it. It's getting very frustrating. I agree with Councillor Gannon, but the one thing I disagree with him that it's surprising that it's the Ulster Unionist Party. Let's just not forget that the Ulster Unionist Party is the party of the one-party state that ruled over and discriminated against all things Irish for until they were actually booted out by their own government from governing here. And as for the comments that Bert made there about this is not democracy, just let's take a wee bit look at democracy. The Tory party governs Britain with around 40% of the people that actually vote. If you take that down to the total number of people that actually vote, they probably are governing in about 28%. So is that democracy? But I'll just leave it at that. It's getting a bit old, the Ulster Unionist Party, and they're anti-Irish, and every single meeting. As bad as the DUP is, what do you call it? They don't come in like the Ulster Unionist Party, just so biased. But then again, maybe their tradition isn't just as bad as the Ulster Unionist Party has been in this regard.
Thank you, Seamus. And finally, we go to Councillor Barry McElduff in the chamber.
Chair, Gormayagat, I recently attended the play in Green and Theatre in Letterkenny, and it was Brian Friel's translations, and it was based on the 1824 to 46 Ordnance and Survey exercise, and it was kind of obvious to everybody present what an act of vandalism it was to anglicise all these place names and how undemocratic that was. And recently, I was delighted that the DUP Minister for Education officially opened Gael School na Gran here in Omagh, and big crowd there, big crowd of young people in attendance, ag freastal an one school sin, and they want to see visibility of their language, of the Irish language, of place names. That's the future. There's a huge attachment to the Irish language in this council area, from Garrison to Eskra and everywhere in between. There definitely is. And I think people should come off this antagonistic agenda. So I'd like to second Councillor Maguire's proposal. Thank you, Chair.
It's already been seconded by Councillor Gannon, but okay, thank you. Sorry, you've been in there. I'm going to let you in briefly here.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to recorded vote on this matter.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McAleer.
Yes, Chair, I'm just in relation to the point Councillor O'Coffey raises and again the lack of a suitable translation for Ashmina. I'm minded just there quite recently there was an event hosted around Craigan, which I believe the council was involved in, where Seamus Conway was doing a speak on local place names and local field names. And I'm wondering I think it was through Pobble and Ur, but as part of the Fela Father Joe festival. So I'm just wondering, would it be worthwhile contacting the likes of Seamus to see if he would have any knowledge on some of the local places, because I think it was predominantly in and around Craigan, Greencastle, Carrickmore direction that he was focused on. But I know that he has done some quite extensive study in this particular area. It might have stretched into, I suppose, the areas near Mountfield that we're talking about in this particular report. Because as Donald quite rightly says, this traditional notion of having the name of the woodland as opposed to the name of a forest and that Anglicanized version of it is a very important, a very Indigenous thing, and it's something that we should strive to protect through this policy. So I'm wondering just if it was possible to do this just as part of the policy that we've adopted. Would that be a potential way around these couple of sticking points that we're having in terms of the translations?
Going to pass you back to Officer John Boyle.
Chair, in relation to Ashmina, I suppose one of the things that we don't want to do is to change the name to another name in Irish as such, and there is a danger of doing that. You know, a name that is known by a certain thing, and you go out to another translator, and there's a danger that there's a local story here, and we'll change it to that. So there is a danger in that. We have a process within our policy of an independent translator, and we use that independent translator. And I know in relation to Ashmina, we will continue to work with him, and he is doing research at this point in time in relation to Ashmina and what that means. I think Councillor O'Coffey's idea about Forest View, I think we will go back to the independent translator in relation to Forest View to see are there others, without changing the name as such of the location itself, to see are there other versions of that which could be explored in relation to that one.
Okay. Thank you, John. Sorry, I'm not going to let this turn into a slagging match, Bert. So
Chair, I did not speak against the Irish language. I said Recalpa Road and Mountfield are, in my opinion, entitled to their Irish signs. What I did say was that if we went by
Bert,
51%,
Bert, I'm going to stop you there, Bert.
we
It
could have
is
saved
council
25
policy that we go with 15%, Bert, so,
we could have
so
saved
I understand what
25,000
you're saying. So thank you, Bert. Sorry, Tommy, I'm going to let you in briefly here, but I've not.
Just briefly on the subject of the translation and the proper translation, and notwithstanding Councillor Coffey's suggestion, I do believe that Forest View is the name of the road, probably as named by this council. So obviously our policy deals with the translation of the names on the roads as they exist, where I do believe, notwithstanding the suggestion of going back for a more historical name, I don't think that's practical for the council. I don't think that's what this project is about. And again, as Councillor McAleer said, he has knowledge of some person that has done research and work on this subject of place names in across our district. Maybe it should be, maybe if they could be made, get in contact with the council and the council could refer them on to our independent translator, because obviously Rourke na Farisha is the translation of Forest View in the modern context. So I understand the context, but I don't think it's practical, nor does it fit with the policy or nor the objectives of the policy at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Maguire. I believe Forest View is a fairly new estate in Mountfield, and it would have been the Legacy Council of Omagh that had the dealings with that, but we'll not go down that road today. Okay, we've heard the proposal to adopt the recommendations, which are approves the installation of dual signage for the streets, roads listed in section 2.7 of this report, in accordance with the street, road naming and numbering policy, including dual language 2021 of this council. And that's been requested as a recorded vote. So if we can set that up, please, because there's obviously dissent on it.
It's 19 actually. Same for 5 abstains, 6 against.
Okay. So with 18 for, 6 against and 5 abstentions. So that motion or that Sorry. That recommendation is passed. So next we go to item 6.2, and again we're going back to Officer John News on this. Sorry, correction. It's John Boyle. It's around the contractor to clean neighbourhood enforcement. So that's Wise.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we had a discussion on this at last month's Environmental Services meeting, and were requested to set up a meeting with Wise, and that meeting was held on the 20th of October, where Wise personnel provided an overview of the service that they provided to the council and answered members' queries on it. They provided an outline of the contract itself, about where they operated in, about how they operated, about how many of the hours that they worked, and how many people were on duty at any one time, and indeed on the number of fixed penalty notices that they issued, and indeed the breakdown. And there was a discussion on the breakdown on cigarette butts and other types of litter. Following that meeting, Wise have contacted us and for the remainder of the contract up until June 2023, they said that they will increase the time that is spent in parks and open spaces in our district by a further 10%. And therefore spending 35% of all their time in those open spaces, and they will endeavour to reduce cigarette litter to below 70%. I think they indicated during the meeting that in other council areas, and indeed holistically across their services across the rest of the UK, that the percentages that ours was in fact the lowest of cigarette butts that was in any council area. I think it was sitting at 72% or something like that. So they will endeavour to reduce that by 70%. And they've also offered that should the contract remain, that members are more than welcome to go out with them to patrol with them, and they will show members the type of work that they do, how they do it, and things like that. And they're very open to that. They've also indicated that should members decide not to continue with the pilot project, that they will terminate it with immediate effect. And I suppose taken that could be a breach of their terms of their service level agreement with us, that would need agreement from members if that were the case. So Chair, the recommendation is simply enough that the council approves the continuation of the current agreement with Wise for the remainder of the 12-month period until June 2023. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. This has already been debated, and we also had a meeting with Wise. So I'm not prepared to go through a rerunning of all of that again. I think most councillors are of an opinion on their views of what happens with Wise, but I'm going to go first of all to Councillor Barry McElduff. But I'm going to caution, I do not want people retelling of stories of what has happened to their constituents. There is a complaints method there, and if they want to follow up, if they're not aware of it, then they can find out and we can make them aware of it. So I want to stick straight to the point. This is purely business, and our decision tonight is whether we continue to 2023 or we terminate, and that's the decision. So first of all, I'm going to go to Councillor Barry McElduff.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to propose that the council discontinues the pilot project, terminates with immediate effect the contract with Waste Inspection and Support and Enforcement. The council entered the contract in good faith, best of intentions. There was a pilot, but it's not effective, and it's not working, and it's far too punitive, and it's far too persecuting, too singularly focused on cigarette butts, and preying on smokers, spotting somebody with a cigarette about to conclude their cigarette and preying on them. And obviously, litter and dog fouling is a really significant problem, in our council area and elsewhere. And we do need an effective strategy of combating litter based on education and enforcement. We do need to focus at all times on how to achieve, higher levels of cleaner neighbourhoods. And, our team works hard at that. I have a personal aversion to litter, and I signed up to the volunteer litter champion scheme, not looking for any medals. But when I do even a walk and talk in Oma on Saturday mornings, I invariably find myself lifting stuff and looking for the nearest bin. And they're not always handy to get the nearest bin. You could be carrying litter for a right distance in your walk. But there's no initial warning, no attempt at education. And I have to say there's an inadequate focus on, for example, hot food packaging, containers, cartons, plastic bottles and plastic bags being thrown on the ground. I mean, if you turn off any of our main roads onto a secondary road, usually they're the places where a lot of stuff is thrown out of cars, for example. So we need a more effective way, a better way, but not entrapment, not preying on smokers, easy targets, low-hanging fruit. And I would also include in my proposal that we ask this organisation to abandon the fine process, that whatever fines they haven't collected to date, that they abandon the exercise. And as you say, John, I'm not going to enter into the stories, but it's very sad to hear people say things like, I am a young mother, child of 9 months, I can't afford £80. There wasn't a bin nearby. It's very sad. And in the cost of living crisis, people suffering real poverty, this is wrong. So I'm proposing that we terminate this contract with immediate effect.
I'm going to go to Officer John Boyle here on the second part there. The first part I'll accept.
Chair, in relation to the abandonment of the fine process, that would automatically happen when the contract is discontinued. And indeed, we as a council could not enforce any outstanding fixed penalty notices, I don't believe, that were not paid by Wise because they were issued by Wise, who we had discontinued with.
Okay. Sorry, Barry, your silence there.
Okay, thank you. Just I'll focus on my main point. My proposal is that we terminate the contract with immediate effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Next, we go to Councillor Matthew Bell.
Thank you, Chair. And I suspect the conversation point I want to bring up will be a bit irrelevant depending on how Councillor McElduff's proposal goes. But myself and I believe another councillor, and if he wishes to highlight himself, if he can, received an email from an individual, and this was highlighting the problem with the way the officers are addressed. I'll not go into the details as I don't think it's appropriate in this chamber, but I do think the point stands is that if we are to continue this contract, the manner in which they dress isn't appropriate. They are incredibly hard to identify, and John, thank you for all the information you sent to me. And from the pictures, they look like they could be anybody wearing tracksuits or perhaps out cycling. The example given to me was our traffic wardens are very identifiable. You can see them coming from about 3 miles away, and they have a friendly nickname some people like to give them. And I think that's the model that if we're to continue this contract, we should be looking at. But I appreciate the comments made by Councillor McElduff. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. Next, we go to Councillor Emmett McAleer.
Thanks, Chair. I definitely am happy to hear the proposal coming forward, and I'm more than happy to second it. It's something that we have been saying from the start isn't right, and we're glad now that others are seeing that too. I do think it's important to note in relation to the original proposal made by Councillor McElduff that item 2.6 on the report, it actually states that they will remove patrols with immediate effect and complete the enforcement process of all issued FPNs. So the request that Councillor McElduff quite rightly made, that those fixed penalty notices are ignored or terminated without being completed, I think is one that we should be making. I appreciate that we're going to an external organisation who stated explicitly in our meeting with them that they're there to make a profit. That's their goal, is to make a profit. And unfortunately, the reports we're hearing back from our residents are it's through fair means or foul. And I'm glad to see that it is being brought forward and that we can act on this and act quite quickly on this, because the idea, I think, to privatise this particular role, I don't think it was a good one from the start, and unfortunately we've been sold a bit of a dud on it. But I'm glad to see that it's coming back in house, and I'm more than happy to second the proposal as originally made by Councillor Michael Duff. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we go to Councillor Eric Thompson.
Thank you very much, again, Chair, and I think Councillor Bell was referring to myself there. I think the two of us, or maybe more of us, even actually got the same email later or earlier today. It's the same, basically, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's the same complaint that we're getting all the time. It's the aggressiveness of it, the approach they have towards our constituents. Should not, I've heard people saying they should not be covert, they should be overt. So the high visibility thing should be coming into it very much. And the dress code isn't acceptable to the constituents out there. I mean, they're coming and giving them, just say, £80 and off, you will pay it. I mean, that is no approach to be had with any of our organisations in this day and age to our general public and our constituents. So we'll be going against the recommendation on this one as a party grouping. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, going to Councillor Donald O'Coffey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm very happy to support the proposal to bring this back in-house. The outsourcing of this function of the council was wrong from day one, and certainly we made the precise anticipation that this would be what would happen, that when you have a system whereby 90% of a fixed penalty is going in terms of profit for a company, it induces all sorts of behaviours, is exactly what we anticipated, and it's what come to bear. So I'm glad I will be, hopefully, will be moving it back, that this function goes back to our own employees. And I recall from my memory now that the original fine that was charged or people were subject to the fine was, I think it was £70 from memory as opposed to 80. So I'd like to have clarification whether the amount will actually go back. And I think that from memory, again, there were some mechanisms in there for hardship and potential to appeal that in some way. And I'm wondering whether that will happen. The one thing I note is that because 90% of these fines have gone to this private company, that's in the last 4 months, that's on the basis of the figures before, so that's £46,260, which perhaps not irrelevantly is significantly above the amount that this council managed to save by not having fireworks this year in either Enniskillen or Roma. So I think that what we should try to do is actually to enforce this policy in-house and to encourage some sort of, the best behaviour from people, but to do it in, as has been stated by other councillors, in an open, transparent, and as well as that's, a way in which people will recognise humanity. And I think that that's what the public sector can bring to bear here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Donald. Next, we go to Councillor Mary Gardy.
Thank you, Chair. And it's just a few questions in the incident that we take what the proposal is from Councillor Michael Duff. As someone who regularly goes out with the community group to lift litter within our community, like everybody here is a pet hate, and it's something we have to, put our attentions to and get on top of. Costs us a lot of money, and it's wrong to litter the beautiful environment that we have here in Fermanagh Oma. My question is, if we go with the proposal of Councillor Michael Duff, he said that we need to go and educate people as of tomorrow or the next day when this is stopped. And I do think it's very regrettable, the experience that people may have had of a negative one from the suppliers that we engage with, and that I have no support for that. But I do need to ask that from tomorrow or the next day on, what do we plan to do if we follow through with Councillor McElduff's proposal? It is regrettable, but we do know there is people that will constantly litter and have no remorse for it. We do know people, and it has been highlighted by members, that have been targeted, and that is not right. But it's striking that balance is the difficulty, and I think that's what we were trying to do. I think to June 23, there may have been merit, but I'm content with the consensus of the council. But I am concerned that with immediate effect, what are we going to do regarding our litter? Because me and many others from the village and local villages across the district are constantly out, going out and getting litter pickers from the council, counting them, leaving them back. If you're any short, I'm replacing them at my own cost. And you're going and you're filling bags that then the council will lift on Monday morning. And, you know, we do have to get on top of this. And some people are or have no remorse for their litter. And it's a pet bug, I know, of all of us, but we certainly don't want people picked on either. But what is the action, Sean, as of tomorrow if this is terminated?
Chair, just to make it clear that the 2 officers which Ways employed in our district from 7 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening were additional to the resources that we already have with enforcement of litter and dog fouling. That will continue. There will be no doubt that there will be a reduction in service because we will not have 2 officers employed in our district that we had from Ways employees. So there will be a reduction in service. Just taking on the one figure that sticks in my head, in the whole of last year, I think officers from the council issued 5 fixed penalty notices for dog fouling. And that's because of the massive difficulty that it is in actually catching a person who is walking a dog who has actually dog foul at that time and walking up to them and saying, I'm an official of the council, and you know I seen your dog fouling and we're going to issue with you fixed penalty notices. To be there at that precise moment is very, very rare, and that's why we only issued 5. In the 3-4 months that we have had Ways employed, I think we issued 12 fixed penalty notices for dog fouling. Yes, that is not an awful lot, but again, it shows the difficulty. So in the whole of last year, we had 5. In this year to date, we had 12, which could equate somewhere to around 30 in year. We will revert back to the lower levels. So there's no doubt that there will be a reduction in service. Now we will. And we did do a massive education program, PR program last April. I think it was March and April of 2021. And we put the stencils on the ground and things like that. And we will continue to work on all of those. But we have limited staff. We don't have unlimited budget, as we're all aware. And it's not something that we can throw massive resources into because we just don't have it in our budgets at this point in time.
Thank you, John. Next we go to Victor Warrington.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think it's sad that this didn't actually work out. Obviously, in theory, it was probably the way to go forward. But unfortunately, the individuals who were charged with enforcing it, I wasn't aware of uniform problems or anything like that. But obviously, they were targeting easy targets. Just let's say, certainly with cigarette butts and what the stories. Obviously, the town areas, there would be more stories coming from there. Obviously, with being in the rural area, I'm not aware really of much of it. But like Mary said, you know, where do we as a council go forward in this? You know, in theory, as I said, these guys probably had the facility to do what we wanted them to do. But moving forward, litter is a big problem. I reported litter to the environmental services back in the springtime on a road beside the church which I go to, and they did go out and they done a litter pick on it, and in a space of 3.5 miles they lifted something like I think 20 odd big bags. So it's you know, it is a major problem and it is a bugbear for us all, and certainly we need something in place going forward that we don't lose the impetus of keeping it certainly very much on the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Victor. Next we go to Councillor Stephen Donnelly.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I think that it's a fair point, well made actually, that there were probably significant representations made to those of us who represent urban DEAs such as Omagh and Enniskillen in terms of these problems. But I think that in terms of the feedback that we've had from the public and indeed from representation in this chamber, it's quite clear that this has been a disastrous approach by this operation from the start. And in that sense, Chair, I think that it is just worth putting on the record the fact that I actually think that the course of action that has been proposed tonight, I think, is entirely reasonable in terms of the fact that I think that we've had enough time to be able to examine the track record on the ground. And I think that further to that, if we look at the small amendments to their operations that are mentioned in the report, I just don't think that it goes anywhere near far enough to being able to restore community confidence in this approach. You know, not least given the aggressive behaviour that we know has been exhibited to many vulnerable people over the course of the last number of months. So I think that we have reached a stage where, quite frankly, we have no choice but to terminate this contract and set about putting in place fresh arrangements that are actually going to deal with the real problems that do exist out there in terms of littering and dogfighting, but ultimately do it with a bit of common sense and proportionality that actually commands community confidence right across the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we go to Councillor Diana Armstrong in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with a lot of the points made there. I think this has been an unfortunate exercise. I'm just remembering a workshop we did on littering possibly up to 2 years ago with the previous director, Celine, and identified the demographic that probably represented those most littering, and that was during the nighttime economy. And again, it was polystyrene and coffee cups and things being fired out of vehicles a certain distance from where food's provided. And that's going to be a difficult thing because that's at night. And it's going to be very, very hard to, I mean, are there any, it's probably for future, but how do you tackle that if we can't, we talk about intelligence-led, that this was intelligence-led, but that's going to be a very difficult one to overcome. Just a comment. Thanks, Chair.
Do you want to come in or do you want me to go on? Chair, there are things I suppose that we can do ad hoc, you know, in ensuring the nighttime economy is at times, at various times. It's not something that we could have officers out every Friday, Saturday and Sunday night outside the fast food outlets, and indeed the fast food outlets might not want you there at those times, you know, for their business either. But it is something that we could do special operations on, I suppose, at various times of the year.
Thank you. Sorry, I've been ignoring WebEx. Sorry. Eamon, Councillor Eamon Keenan, do you want to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm not going to get into the stories of how badly this company has treated our constituents, but there are many. But yes, I'm very happy to support the proposal to end the contract as this is the right step to take to protect our constituents from this private vulture company who openly and happily prey on the vulnerable and the easy targets for financial gain. And the sad thing is they've done this with the cooperation with ourselves from Monaghan District Council. Myself and a few other councillors at the time did warn that this might happen, and unfortunately our concerns became reality. So yes, Chairman, I'm happy to support the proposal to end the contract, but the only thing I would say is I do hope that we have learned a costly lesson that the race to privatisation and profits is not always the best option for our community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Eamon. Before I bring in any other speakers, this topic has been well debated, so would you keep your points concise? I think everything has been covered, so unless you have something particularly new, I want you to be concise with what you're going to say. So next I'm bringing in Bernice Swift, Councillor Bernice Swift.
I'll be very swift on this one here. I agree to terminate. Certainly it has been tried, it has been tested, and it didn't work. The issue remains about addressing littering and indeed the fouling, so that will have to be addressed now by our council without the easy targeting, as has been described, of these harsh wise operators. the very fact that they were operating in a covert manner really is so creepy, and it's indeed spookier than Halloween itself. And I didn't agree with any of it. And I have heard the harsh and hateful stories and experiences from some citizens. So I fully object to it going forward as it is. And I agree with other members and wish to impress as well that any FPNs must cease forthwith also. Guramagat.
Thank you, Bernice. There seems to be a general trend with every speaker here. So I have a couple more speakers here, but again, be concise. We seem to have a general theme here, and we want to get to the point here so we can move on. So, Councillor Dr. Josephine Deacon, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. And I think it has been a very illuminating debate. I want to give my unequivocal support for Councillor Barry McElduff's proposal. And I think that he has summed up our concerns very clearly, and other members have voiced their concern. Chair, I think that, it has been a very painful process for this council, and I do hope that there will be learning from it. This council takes littering very seriously. I want to pay tribute to council staff who pick up the litter, which should not have been dropped in the first place. Certainly in my own area of Killyclogher, there is a very diligent council officer who goes round each morning collecting bags of litter, and it makes my heart sink. It must be so demoralizing for him that he leaves the place pristine in the morning, and then the next morning it's as bad as ever. Education, and in particular, the development of social responsibility in each and every citizen is the main challenge for us. But this venture into WISE has been painful and unsuccessful. And I want to take this opportunity, Chair, of publicly apologising to our constituents of this council for the hurt and the pain that the decisions of this council have made. And I certainly will be urging the council to think very carefully before embarking on this painful road again. But Chair, my unequivocal support for Councillor McElduff's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come in and reiterate the comments that have gone before. I know that a few members have talked about education in terms of this, and littering is an issue for everyone in the district, because we have been told before by officers of the costs of clearing up after people who throw their litter on the ground is up to £50 per resident in the district. And given the difficult times ahead, we are going to have to, educate people to not throw their litter on the ground. So I would suggest, as part of the education, that we promote leave no trace in our urban areas. We promote it in our rural areas. Certainly to promote leave no trace, clear up after yourself, take your rubbish home with you. And I think that's the way forward if everyone works together, both our staff and the people across the district. So happy to support terminating this contract.
Thank you. Next we go to the final speaker, is Councillor Robert Irvine.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks very much, Directors. Look, it's a thorny issue. I think the Council entered it with the right reasons, but the outcome is not what we wanted, and I think we all accept that. The problem is, certain councillors have commented, this Council takes high pride in trying to actually go for zero litter. Its officers try and enforce that. The reality is, a substantial proportion of our population have the opposite opinion. Because if they did not, if they aligned themselves with the thought process of the council, they wouldn't litter in the first place. The question that I have back to John is this a statutory core or discretionary role of the council, first of all, with regard to both litter picking and clearing up dog fouling? And two, we've talked before about trying to educate, and with the greatest respect, I think, to a lot of councillors, it's falling on deaf ears. Education actually starts at home, And if the parents don't actually educate or encourage their children, it won't happen. So we've seen in other regards with attitudes and approaches to going on, it's not working. So if we're going to actually pump money into education, I think we've got to be very careful to see that there is an outcome rather than just a promotional basis, because cost is a problem. We highlighted the issue of bottles and containers. Is there anything nationally going on with regard to traceability? We talked about, I think, a national campaign maybe to charge on bottles for collection and disposal, as happens in other countries with plastic and glass, that there's a levy, an additional levy put on so that they can actually be returned and then disposed of properly. So it actually carries a cost. The empty container has a cost if it's returned. With regard to carryouts and other things, is there any way that nationally barcoding could be put on so you can actually trace at least to where the container came from, which outlet? Because if we don't, the attitude of people is they're going to continue doing it, and they will only scream and moan when they're actually caught, as we do. We haven't the resources, and I would definitely be against supplementing with in-house resources to supplement the two that Wise had actually employed. We haven't got the staffing, we haven't got the resource, we haven't got the money. We can't do it. So we're going to have to look at other routes to try and cut it down. It's good that the community actually voluntarily does it, but they shouldn't have to do that. It's individual responsibility not to litter. It's against the law, and people are breaking the law when they do it. That's it. Thanks very much. Just a couple of questions there, Chair.
Right. Thank you. Just before we put this to the chamber, I'm going to bring in Officer John Boyle. Correction, I'm bringing in John News first, and then we're going to Officer John Boyle.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to is it a statutory duty? Yes, it's an offence to litter, and that's described within the Clean Neighbourhoods and Environment Act, and there's a role for council described within that in terms of enforcement, and we have a responsibility then in terms of clearing up litter and in terms of the maintenance of the area. The members also referred to or asked about traceability of containers. There's this was the specific question about barcoding of items that may be discarded. My understanding is that that's not likely to be the route that will go down, but the extended producer responsibility and deposit return scheme, that's a UK-wide scheme, and that's looking at levies being charged onto the main producers. That those levies then would essentially be come into a central pot. Then the costs that are incurred, the reasonable costs that are incurred by district councils in terms of addressing litter would be go into, if you like, a big calculator as well, and there's an apportionment of funding back to local authorities across the UK based on the volumes of litter and the costs that are incurred, and so the funding for that programme will come from the producers. And so I mean there's a there's a black box that DEFRA will be working up and DAERA will be working up as to the apportionment of that. I would say that's still at least 15 months away before we start to see any revenues flowing from that. And in the first instance, it's likely to be on a modelled basis rather than based on actual cost, because they have to look at the way in which costs are reported across not just local authorities in Northern Ireland, but across England and Wales as well.
Thank you, John, and we'll go to John Boyle now.
Chair, if I can just come in on one point. Councillor O'Coffey had mentioned about the proposal to maybe revert back to pre-contract fixed penalty notice fine rates. I know when we took on the contract with Wise, one of the proposals which was adopted was the £80. So if members were agreed to revert back, if that could be made as a formal proposal, then that would allow us to move forward on that if that were members' decision.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I think being that we now have consideration of this, there was something else also raised when this was first being discussed, and that was the notion of a sliding scale fine system. And I note that this is in force in many European countries at the moment, and I'm wondering whether I'd like to propose that we investigate the potential of such an approach on this, because obviously, considering the pressure from the cost of living on so many at the moment, what might be a livable fine to many will be completely unattainable to others, and ruinous indeed. So I'm just wondering if it's possible that we can investigate the opportunity of having a progressive fine system. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, next, going quickly to Councillor Adam Gannon.
If that is a possibility, Chair, what Councillor O'Coffey has proposed, I'd be happy to second it. It makes a lot of sense, and for some people, an £80 fine is nothing, a drop in the water, and they're more than willing to pay it. But for other people, that could be them homeless because of that fine. So it is a good way of correctly implementing fines, I believe, and we've seen it in other countries to great success. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm just briefly going to let Councillor Tommy.
I'm going to carry just on the proposal of Councillor O'Coffey about a graduated scale of fines and wherever the model of that is, I've never heard of it. But if that is adopted tonight, could we also get a cost of the implementation of such a fine process? Because I think the process of administering such a sliding scale would far outweigh the value of any fine or any costs or benefits to this council. I wait to be convinced if we do decide to bring back that draft proposal, but I certainly would want the cost of it included, Chair. I don't find it very satisfactory.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. And next we go to Councillor Victor Warrington.
Certainly, and I think most of my colleagues are the same, we would not be in support of a sliding scale fine system. At the end of the day, if you do the crime, you do the time.
You, Victor. So,
thank you for that, Madam Chair, and I'll not be long. I just want to support the comments of Councillor Warrington on this. If you're guilty, you should pay the fine. End off. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. So, our first proposal, and I'm not seeing any dissent on that, was by Councillor McElduff that we, with immediate effect, terminate the contract with Wise, and that was seconded by Councillor Emmett McAleer. And don't believe there's any dissent to that. I haven't heard anybody speak any different. So if you're in dissent with that, please indicate now. I'm not seeing anybody. So that proposal is now adopted, that the council terminates the contract. The second proposal is that Councillor O'Coffey's that we reduce the fine to £70, and then his further proposal is that we bring back a report. Okay, sorry, I'll refer back to John here.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, Chair, I don't believe I had suggested that maybe if Councillor O'Coffey wished to make that a proposal, that didn't come forward as a proposal. Instead, there was a proposal to investigate a sliding scale for fixed penalty notices for littering.
Okay, so that was seconded. So are we all in agreement? No? Right, so then we're, sorry.
There's a timeline there, supposing how that will impact the situation going forward. If it had to be reverted back to immediately, would that be correct in saying that, John, or have I maybe missed that point? Apologies if I have.
Chair, the policy of the council at the moment, which was to prior or when Ways were employed, part of the proposal was to increase the fixed penalty notices fines to £80. That still stands. So it does so until such times as the sliding scale would be investigated and where it works in European countries or wherever, that £80 would continue to be in operation.
Just want that for clarity. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So I'm just going to briefly bring you in, Donald.
Sorry, yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I thought it was fairly clear what my intent was. Perhaps I should have made it clearer, but I certainly was happy to move towards a system where we reverted to the original pending an investigation on the ability to bring forward a sliding scale. So I'm happy to make that clear if that was not. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor, can you split those into two proposals? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Irving.
Point of order is, when was the policy adopted with regard to employing wisely the contract? Because currently, if we have a policy in place, we can't change it within 6 months. Is that correct? So just sort out when it was done.
Yeah, Chair, it is beyond the 6 month mark that we took the decision in council, even though they weren't employed until July. The decision was taken. I believe it may have been March of this year. So we are outside the six month.
As long as we're outside the 6 months, then we can change the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Irving. That's a good point. Councillor Maguire, quickly.
And just for clarification, we will receive a report on this graduated fine model that is.
Well, I'm going to ask the councillors that if they want to, but yes, yes, Councillor.
That it will be a report brought back to
Yes.
us. Yeah, and obviously the costs of administering the aforesaid. Good.
Okay. Quickly going to Councillor Gannon, who seconded Councillor O'Coffey's proposal.
So, sorry, Chair, I was confused. I understood it when John said it the first time, then we went back and we had a bit of discussion. So if I'm picking it up right, the two proposals from Councillor Coffey are that we stay as we are and we get a report back on the
No,
sliding scale.
his proposal is we go back to the 70 and then the officers bring forward a report as the second into the sliding scale and where it works. in
And
Europe.
then we'll decide on the 80 at a later stage.
No,
after
the 80 we
first.
decide on tonight, whether we go
Okay.
back to 70 or not.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
And are you going to second his second proposal? Yes. Okay, thank you. Right, well then I think I'll just go straight to the vote here.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to call for a recorded vote if there is dissent on either of the two votes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the first matter is there likely to be dissent on the reducing of the fine to £70 as it was pre-contract? And I'm not seeing any dissent, so that is passed. The second proposal is to bring forward a report on the sliding scale and any cost implications the implementation of that would imply. So we're going to put that one to the vote then. So we're voting on whether we bring forward a report. If you can set that up, please. Yes. Huh? Oh, I voted yes. Okay, so we have 21 for, 9 against, and 7 did not record their vote. So, so that passes. So the officers will bring forward a report. Next, we go on to agenda item 6.3 is the dog control. And we go to Officer John Boyle.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's an update on the dog control service on a number of issues. The first one is in relation to stray and unwanted dogs. There has been a significant increase in the number of stray and unwanted dogs, not only in our district, but in all districts and indeed across all other councils. And that has a limit on the number of kennel spaces which are available. And maybe this is an indication of post-COVID, when a lot of people purchase dogs now and realise what it is what it is to look after them, and now they are unwanted or stray. Many charities are in fact considering placing a cap on the number of dogs which they will accept, and that may further increase the number of stray and unwanted dogs. Also, the Dogs Trust do not any longer provide neutering vouchers, and that also will probably increase the number of stray and unwanted dogs. The numbers themselves for the same period, for the 6 months ending the 30th of September, compared with the same period in 2021, we have dealt with 3 times the number of stray and unwanted dogs which we had for this time last year. All dogs taken by the council to be rehomed must have up-to-date vaccinations, microchipped, and if they haven't had the vaccinations or they aren't microchipped, that's a cost of £72.50. We currently charge for unwanted dogs. We currently have a charge of £15, and so therefore it doesn't take account of full cost recovery if we're taking that dog. So it is proposed that the council no longer accepts unwanted dogs because of the pressure that is on our dog pound, and indeed on other charities who historically would have taken dogs from us, but that we will provide owners with the details of local animal charities to those dog owners who don't want dogs anymore. The second element of the report deals with the dog pound. There was a request in the chamber previously about looking at various options for the dog pound ran by the council itself, to see if local charities or other organisations would be interested in running it. We have went out to look at a process. We absolutely got no interest at all. We have spoken to a number of the charities, and they have said that they would not be interested in taking on our dog pound. I suppose that is an indication of the number of dogs which are currently unwanted and unstrayed, as is in the first part of the report, but also the increased costs of running such a facility, whether it be electricity or feed for the dogs, and indeed the increasing costs of veterinary fees in relation to it. So therefore it is proposed that the council continues to operate its own in-house dog kennelling facility. The third part of the report is an update on the recent dog control attacks and the formal actions and prosecutions. I must apologise, the Appendix 1 of this report didn't go up until this evening, and that was an oversight on my own behalf. The Dog Control Service has dealt with 22 attacks involving dogs from the 1st of April. Those 22 are just those of which formal action has been taken. In total, there have been, and I should have included this in the report, that there have been 59 dog attacks in year, but 22 of those with formal actions haven't been taken against them. The others are under investigation at this point in time. And you will see in Appendix 2 the nature of those 22 dog attacks and actions that has been taken. there has been a number of successful prosecutions for whether it be dog straying, and indeed there is another one noted in the report there of an appeal against the council's imposition of control conditions, which the council were successful in. The final part of the report deals with buying a puppy for Christmas campaign, and where the dog warden service will be highlighting that the dogs are for life and not just for Christmas. In the same way as we are seeing the increase in the number of dogs which were bought and were purchased by owners during COVID, we do always see a spike at Christmas time, but then a few months later we see an increase in the number of stray dogs also. We will be promoting the campaign that a new dog comes with responsibilities, and that we will be highlighting them to our website about buying and caring for a puppy, the information that we have there. So Chair, it's recommended that the council approves that the council no longer accepts unwanted dogs, that it approves to continue to operate the dog kennel facility in-house using council staff, that it notes the recent prosecution case outcomes and notes the Christmas puppy campaign. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, go first of all to Councillor Emmett McAleer in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the Director for the report. Excuse me. I'm happy to support the latter three recommendations in the report, but I would be minded that we actually continue to accept unwanted dogs as a council, and I would make that as a formal proposal that we do change that. Given the figures, I suppose, noted, and I was maybe a wee bit confused about some of the time settings around that, but given the overall figures that are stated in the report, the unwanted number of dogs in the district seems to be, I suppose, at its worst, about a third of the figures that are presented for strays. So I think overall it's not a massive take, but the fact that we're continuing with the council dog kennel facility, that it's incumbent on us, as although my mother would disagree with me, as a nation of dog lovers, I think it is something that we should be very much inclined to do. I am in complete agreement with and awareness of the importance. Again, we talk about education as a vital part of this, that well-known phrase that a dog is for life, not just for Christmas. That has to be hammered home, but I think given the cost of living crisis that we're in, it's probably an extreme expenditure and expense on people that maybe they hadn't accommodated for. And I think the humane thing to do is to continue with that, offering that facility, even if maybe members are minded at a later date to revisit in terms of the overall or the additional cost to council. But I would certainly be of a mind at present that we do continue to offer that service. So I'm going to make that just as an amended proposal to what's presented here. Thank you, Chair.
Next we go to Councillor Adam Gannon.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I want to put on record my appreciation and thanks to Director John Boyle for his work on this. I know I'd been in touch with him a lot of times about this a long time ago, and we would have been hopeful that a charity could have took it on, but and there would have been an excellent adoption because we have some excellent charities. But unfortunately, I don't think anyone back a year ago would have been predicting the increased costs that we were facing and how extreme it would be, and the impact on that and the increase in number of dogs. I'm just thinking about Councillor McAleer's amended proposal there, in terms of what would be the implications of us accepting or continuing to accept unwanted dogs, in terms of resources and finances, and as well as that, in terms of will there be a situation where there is so many that dogs simply have to be put down? I know we can't look after dogs indefinitely as a council. What would be the implications of that on us? Because it might be, maybe we might be the easy option to give the dog to, and it could have bad overall circumstances where if that option wasn't there, the family or the individual may keep the dog and, you know, it still live a happy life. I was just wondering what the Director's opinions were on that.
Chair, at the moment we are at capacity and of the number of dogs that we are taking in. and it is increasing. The demand on its service is increasing. And you will see there, and yes, it's not a massive amount, but 49 dogs in the first 6 months that were unwanted by the public. Those are 49 that we could stay in people's homes, you know, or with friends or with neighbours, or other alternative mechanisms be put in place. We do have to deal with the stray dogs. We have a responsibility for stray dogs that are endangering communities or whatever, to go and lift those. So we don't have a choice on those. But we are under severe pressure in our dog pounds in order to free up the space. And that will ultimately increase the costs.
Just coming in the second, the proposal from Councillor McAleer. Where obviously the pressures on households are, many households are making people make very difficult decisions. And these are this is reflected in the surge in the number of dogs which have, you know, people just unable to perhaps look after them. And the alternative we have to consider, if we don't facilitate, you know, this service or the continuation of this service, is that dogs will be maybe increase in number of strays. There may be dogs starving. That's what happens. And I don't think it's the right thing for us to do as a council, that we would just you know, just withdraw the responsibility from that. Now, I do think I would like to make one additional proposal, which is that considering we have this large number of dogs that's been given in to us, I think we should try and, I'd like to propose that we make an advertisement, especially coming up with Christmas, that to make people aware of this, to make people aware that, you know, if they are able to look after dogs, that, you know, this is the humane approach. So I think alongside continuing this vital service, we and to avoid the prospect of dogs being dumped onto the street and literally starving to death. That's what will happen if we don't do it. Then I think we also need to bring in a positive move to try and encourage people to take to step up and to give homes to these dogs. So I'd like to make that proposal as well. Second the proposal from Councillor McAleer. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Well, our two previous speakers, I would have to agree with them. I think if we don't take these dogs in, there is going to be a huge risk that they're just going to be abandoned, taken out the road, taken a couple of miles away and dumped out of the car, and that's going to lead to dogs being starved or whatever. We are a nation of animal lovers and we are a nation of dog lovers, and certainly I don't want to see dogs suffering. Unfortunately, COVID did lead to people getting dogs and maybe didn't put very much thought into it, where COVID, well, albeit it's not gone, but a lot of people have returned very much to normality now, but the dog doesn't just disappear like that. We have a 15.5 miniature schnauzer at home, and certainly there's times we'd like to show her the door, but it doesn't happen. And I could not see dogs being let loose and dumped, and it's inhumane. And I certainly would be agreeing with the proposal that we don't, that we keep the service to deal with the stray dogs. I'm happy enough with everything else in the recommendations, but certainly would be for keeping and I know it's going to cause problems to the council with space and whatever, but I certainly think it's something that we need to retain. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Mary Gardick.
Thank you, Chair. And if I don't know if it hasn't been seconded, I want to second Councillor Coffey's proposal about having a promotional campaign about the animals that we do have, because there would be a lot of genuine houses that might be considering getting an animal maybe at Christmas, and our dogs, they're vaccinated, they're microchipped, they're good to go, and probably a lot cheaper and maybe more reliable than maybe where they could end up buying a dog. So I think that idea certainly has merit. My concern is with, and Councillor McLear, I know would be coming from a very genuine place from point one of the recommendation, is that, John, you have alluded, and I think, I don't know, Victor, so we're all clear on this, we have to lift roaming dogs. These dogs are unwanted, which is different. This is coming from perhaps, say, my house, your house, that got it during COVID and said, listen, this is a real hassle. And I know that can be the case too. People have to work, people are at home and they go out, but perhaps people could make the effort. There's a difference between a stray dog and an unwanted dog. So I think that's what we have to be clear on. My concern is if we drop point one to what Councillor McLear suggests, we are going to take these dogs in, and it's not going to be humane for the animals that we have currently. And if we are at capacity, we'd be, you know, one of these pup hound places, you know, that are never got good publicity. What do we have to do to regulate our facilities to make it the correct environment for the dogs we have? And I would imagine that would mean put dogs down. And that's just defeating the purpose from what we're doing. So I totally understand where they're coming from, but this is not stray dogs. This is unwanted dogs that people have to take responsibility for, like their litter, like their dogs, like their children, like their vehicles, like whatever we have, and man up in this country, because you know what, people are getting away with too much sometimes. And you know, I just think we haven't the money. We're costing ourselves more money tonight. We've cut services earlier tonight and we've lost revenue. And I think to be putting this, and I think I'm coming from the dog's point of view, and I don't want dogs taken in on top of other dogs that we can't simply facilitate, and then other dogs are just going to be put down because it seems like a nice option and nobody will see it. So that's, for that reason, I'll second Councillor Gannon's proposal to the recommendations as they stand. Thank you, Chair.
So going quickly to Councillor Stephen Donnelly.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I'm happy to support both of the proposal from Councillor McLear and from Councillor O'Cofaigh. I fully appreciate that us removing the first recommendation is going to create challenges for the council, but equally, I think that we have to be alive to the fact that actually there will be consequences if we do actually remove our current responsibilities in terms of unwanted dogs. I mean, we can have a debate around sort of the abstract differences between stray and unwanted in terms of our own responsibilities, but we have to be realistic about the fact that ultimately, if families run out of options, stray dogs will unwanted dogs will become, you know, stray dogs, or even end up in worse situations. You know, whenever we were, if we were debating this in any other situation, in any other time period where we didn't have the pressures around cost of living, where we didn't have families really in a position of financial struggle, I think that there would be merit in potentially having this debate. But I think at this particular time period, it is the worst time for us to actually be embarking on this particular kind of debate. So honestly, I don't think we have any choice at the minute other than to continue with the present policy. From the point of view of making sure that we stand up for families who do find themselves in a position of financial hardship, but also because it's actually fundamental in terms of the present animal welfare situation in this district. Thank you, Chair.
Officer John Boyle is going to speak here just for a second.
Chair, just to be clear, we are at capacity. All dog charities are at capacity. Normally what we would do is that when we would take in dogs, we would move them on to dog charities or whatever. As I've stated in the report there, the Dogs Trust in England have a waiting list of up to 400 dogs that they're waiting to take in at this point in time. So dog charities are at capacity also. So it isn't necessarily about the cost of this, although cost is an implication to euthanize a dog, but that's the direction that we will be going in.
Thank you. Bringing in Councillor Matthew Bell.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate those comments, John. But I do think those definitely merit on what Councillor Stephen Donnelly said earlier, and it's the nail on the head. Unwanted dogs become stray dogs very, very, very quickly if they are left abandoned. I want to, I suppose, highlight a personal experience. Before COVID, I went to Greece for a holiday, and I was quite amazed by the amount of stray dogs roaming about. So I asked a local, I said, what's the crack with all these dogs? And he basically told me that before the 2008 financial crash, people in Greece, they loved their dogs, but Greece had their financial hardships and they released them. So whenever you sit on the beautiful Greece beaches in Greece now, there's packs of second or third generation wild dogs that are the descendants of those dogs that were released shortly after the 2008 crash. And I do think we need to be wary of the possibility of stray dogs roaming our countryside.
Thank you. Councillor Anthony Foley.
Thanks,
quickly.
Chair. Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief. It's a tricky one this now. It's part of we'd want to go with the recommendation, but I know money's tight and we have to make some kind of cutbacks, and I understand what John Boyle's coming from there with the recommendation. But then I think on the other hand, then on unwanted dogs or stray dogs, whatever people want to call them, there would be roaming about, and as Donal was saying, they would be hungry. I'd be just a fear of killing sheep. Sheep worrying that not far from the towns, head out. And yeah, I'm from a farming background, like a lot of you say. There does be big issues with lambs being killed and ewes being killed. So that would be kind of a fear I would have, that be more of that going on, and that's not a nice thing either. Like so, but I know I understand it's a tricky one, and that is a good idea from Donal. I think put it up on Facebook and see does anybody want dogs, but I say you'd have probably get big enough body getting rid of dogs at the minute now, but this is a tricky one.
Right. It's becoming quite clear we have two chains of thought. One is that we go with all 4 recommendations, and one is we go with 3 recommendations. And given the time I'm looking at here, we're going to have to make a decision on this quite quickly. And with a number of speakers indicating, I don't feel that they're going to bring anything new. So I think we'll have to make a decision on this fairly quickly. So unless somebody has something new, right, okay, I'm going to let you in quickly, Councillor Maguire, but I think we're going to run out of time, and I don't think we're going to have time to finish this meeting.
Right, Gurmagad, Chair, and it's basically a question on the point at 2.1.4 where the council charges £15 for an unwanted dog. And apologies if it was answered while I was out of the room there, but could Director Boyle give us some indication of the actual costs of the council taking on unwanted dogs?
Chair, it's in there. It all depends if the dog has their vaccinations or if they've been microchipped. But there is a potential for a dog to cost in the vets alone now, and this isn't even looking after the dogs when we would take them. But veterinary costs alone would cost £72.50.
And on top of that, there the length of their stay and feeding, etc. So you're talking several £100 per dog.
It could be as much as that, yes. And then if we were to euthanize that dog, you would be talking in total costs of up to £300.
Euthanize a dog is up to 300.
No, on top, including in that, if we were to before we take them in, we have to make sure that they have their vaccinations and that they're microchipped. But if we have them for a certain length of time, and there is no home for them, there is no charity to take them, then we will have to euthanize them. And the total cost of the full package could be up to £300.
It's very worrying, the cost. That would be my angle, and despite the cliche that one of the councillors used that we're a land of dog lovers, I certainly don't fall into that bracket. I would have concerns about dogs, and I continually express them at this chamber, and dog attacks, etc., are very relevant and very relevant to myself in my personal experiences with dogs. I think it's a worry. Again, it's a bit like the littering. There's a responsibility on every individual that takes on a dog to keep that dog the same as a child in a house. You don't have children without unless you're going to care for them. I would be very strict on if you have a dog, you certainly should be paying for it. And I'm aware that it's up to about £1,500 per household to keep a dog for 12 months. But I would be very reluctant for this council to be taking on that added burden financially when it is a case of people either through their own fault or pure neglect and idleness just deem a dog unwanted and landed to this council to be maintained. So I would have concerns about this issue, Margaret.
Okay. I don't believe we'll finish the meeting if we extend, because we have another topic under confidential, and I think that needs full debate. If you ask a quick question, then it'll probably mean there's no vote on this. Go ahead.
How many dogs are actually rehomed from our pound? Would there be a certain amount of numbers? Is there any idea over a month or over 3 months or whatever? How many dogs from our pound is rehomed?
Chair, to be honest, I will have to come back to members in relation to the exact figures. I could throw you out a figure, but it wouldn't be. It would be based on my own feelings rather than actual.
Okay, right. I am of the opinion that this meeting cannot be concluded tonight. The officers will try and fit these topics in, or else we may have a reconvened meeting, but I'm finishing this meeting now. It's now 10 o'clock, so safe home everybody that's here.